And we are ready to roll. Morena, tēnei te mihi nui ki a koutou, no mai haere mai. Good morning and welcome. I almost feel like saying welcome back because it almost feels like an extension of yesterday's meeting. And our finance officers here are nodding because they not only went through yesterday, and will go through today, but they dreamed about it all night as well. But they assure me it was a dream and not a nightmare, so that's a good thing. Let's run through. I think I'll do the roll call first of all. So if you can just indicate if you are hearing fine and you are present. So I start with Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore.
Present, sir.
Thank you. Josephine Bartley.
Talofa, present.
Kathy Casey.
Morena Phil.
Morena. Efeso Collins.
Talofa, Mayor and Committee.
Talofa. Pippa Coombe.
Kia ora, Mr. Mayor, and nice to see you on the video as well. So hope you can keep that up today.
Not through all of it. No, there comes a time when I need to relax and not scowl and behave myself properly. Linda Cooper. Linda, have we got you with us today? I'm told that you're there, Linda, but you might be muted.
Sorry, it just dropped off and I've just had to come back in. So yes, I'm back again.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Linda. Angela Dalton.
Present.
Thank you. Chris Darby.
Morena, Mayor and members.
Elf Filipina.
Morena koutou.
Talofa. Chris Fletcher.
Kia rana.
Kia rana. Well, that's something a little bit different today. Shane Henderson.
Hello, good morning, everybody.
Richard Hills.
Morena, everyone.
Mook Honek. You there, Mook?
I think he may be having some little difficulties, but getting assistance.
Okay, so we'll give him some help there if that's required. Tracy Mulholland.
Aloha and morning, committee members.
We're being very diverse today. Thank you, Tracy. Daniel Newman.
Sat Sri Kao, Your Worship.
adding to the pattern. Leanne Namane. No, I don't think Leanne's due on today. She's on my list. So I hear David there, so I'll tick David off. Greg Sayers.
Yes, hello, Mr. Mayor and councillors and my MSP members.
Now, somebody has got us on call waiting, which happened yesterday as well. I don't know whether we can... we've dealt with that. That's good. Desley Simpson.
Good morning, everybody. I'm here.
Sharon Stewart.
Good morning.
Wayne Walker. Wayne, I know you're there. I heard you before. But we'd like you to confirm it. Wayne may have dropped out, but hopefully we'll be coming back. We'll just follow up on him. John Watson.
Good morning, Talofa.
And Paul Young.
Good morning, 大家早, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Paul, and welcome everybody. So apologies, we have no apologies at this point. Declaration of interest. Is there any councillor or IMSB member that needs to make a declaration of interest? Confirmation of minutes. I have one set of minutes from the 14th of May, and I will move and ask for somebody to second that this is a true and correct record.
Second.
Seconded. That's Desley, I think. Is it Desley?
It is Desley.
Yep. Great. So I'll put that by voices. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no. Carried. Petitions. We have no petitions. Public input. No requests have been received. Local board input. No requests there either. Extraordinary items. None known at this stage. So we come to the first item on our agenda, which is the COVID-19 briefing. You will all have received a email from Phil Wilson this morning and I concur with what he is recommending, that this will be a relatively quick presentation. We heard from Phil, I think almost all of us were on the IMSB meeting on Monday, so we don't require a report from him. We'll have a quick update from both Ian Maxwell and Mace Ward, and I understand that Nick Hill is also on the line, and he will give us a brief presentation on the work that ATEED is doing in terms of wider business support. I've had the benefit of that as part of the Business Advisory Panel presentation, but I think it's important that we hear from Nick on that. I would hope to keep this session relatively brief with a minimum of questions and comments if we can, colleagues, because we have a fairly long agenda in terms of the budget and the financial papers. So can I welcome, first of all, Ian Maxwell, and ask Ian just to give us a brief presentation. He also has sent out a copy of the Emergency Coordination Centre status and what's happening there, so members should have received that. Ian.
Look, thank you very much, Your Worship. I will be brief today and just highlight a couple of issues, and I'll also pick up what normally Mace or Kate would have covered. And if there are any questions, we can cover those perhaps outside the meeting, or you can send comments through. So look, just in general, the Emergency Coordination Centre remains active, and it remains primarily focused on COVID. But it's also fair to say that things are definitely starting to run down, and staff are being released back into the sort of business as usual council activities, and also to thinking about the drought and the water supply issues coming towards us. In terms of welfare, the number of requests coming through to our call line has continued to decline. So last week we only had 150 requests, and that's in comparison to some 5,000 we had in the first week. So there's a nice illustration there of the change that's taking place. What we're doing in terms of supporting sort of food supply, emergency food supply and emergency household supplies to the region, is that we're supporting food banks. And you will notice in the report from Mace and Kate that over $1 million now of support has been committed to food banks operating across the city. And this is part of the transition from the emergency situation to enhancing the business as usual approaches whereby the needs of Aucklanders can be met. Just as an aside, those funds are clearly reimbursed from central government, so they're not coming out of ratepayer funding. In terms of our regional isolation and quarantine operations, so again, we've got nearly 2,000 people in managed isolation and another just over 100 or so in quarantine. The change that's taking place there is that increasingly we are focusing on providing that accommodation not in the city centre but actually in other hotels. And the reason for transitioning out of the city centre is that increasingly as we move to level 2, there are more and more people in the city centre, and we're finding it more and more difficult to enable those folk in isolation to get their exercise programs and so forth. So you'll see less, if you do come into the city centre over the last week or two, you will have seen those people walking through the city centre, and increasingly that will become, that won't be occurring, that'll be taking place elsewhere in the city. So that's a very quick summary of where we are with our response. So I'm moving on now to Auckland Council. So look, the move to level 2 across the council group has gone smoothly, but we still have many people working from home. And you may recall that for the first 2 weeks of level 2, we'd set up to receive some 30% of the capacity of our buildings for staff. The actual occupancy rate, not just in the parent, but actually right across the group, has actually been around 20%. So we still have large numbers of people working from home. And we're using this initial period to sort of test our social distancing, our track and tracing and hygiene requirements. And we expect to be at 50% occupancy in early June. Last week, the staged reopening of services commenced, and this week our customer and services teams will be out with local boards, or starting to get out to local boards, discussing around the further reopening of community services and facilities. the level 1 water restrictions commenced this week, and both Watercare and Healthy Waters are leading means to sort of mitigate the ban on standpipes on the construction industries, and that's involving alternative non-potable water supplies. So that work's still ongoing, but nevertheless we're focused on that. And Watercare is certainly leading work and council's involved with it to a degree with regards to enhancing sort of potable or alternative potable water supplies, drinking water supplies, with the consenting of extra intakes and dams and reservoirs. But also there are discussions underway with major consumers with the aim of reducing their demand. So look, that's all I was going to cover. It's fairly quick and brief, but if there are, I suppose the clear message is that we are downsizing and transitioning away from emergency provisions associated with COVID, more towards enhancing business as usual activities. Certainly central government departments, MSD, etc., are seeing a significant increase in demand, but they are gearing up to actually deal with that. So our emergency operations will be reduced as they gear up. And as we look ahead in terms of the risks associated with the water supply issue, we're working with Watercare and we're gearing up about how we might respond to that. So look, I'll stop there. And if there are any questions, particularly individual ones, I think we can probably deal with those offline if you send them through the chat function associated, or just email Mace Ward or myself directly and we'll get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Are there any additional comments from Mace, or have you covered for both of them?
I've tried to cover for both.
Okay, that's great. Before we moved, thank you for the offer to take questions that can be emailed to you, and that will help a lot. I will open it up for a brief space, but I think we'll hear first of all from ATEED and Nick Hill. Nick, have we got you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so if I can get you also, Nick, please, to keep the presentation relatively brief, but then I'll open it up for a few questions if there are pressing questions that have wider relevance at the end of this. But if there are questions you can ask directly to any of the people who've presented, please do so directly rather than through this session. Nick.
Okay, thank you. Can you put up the short presentation that I've provided? Thank you. It looks like my notes. Oh yeah, there it is. Just before I jump into this, I'll just explain that this is about what ATEED is doing right at the moment to respond to the COVID crisis. I'm not talking here about the medium-term challenges and opportunities. I think we will look to talk about that much more in the development of our statement of intent and what we believe those are. The second opening comment I'd like to make is that we are quite pessimistic about the next 6 months to 12, 18 months in terms of what we face. We think it's going to get a lot worse than it is right now. That the subsidy for the wage subsidy and some of those immediate responses from the government are cushioning some of the immediate impacts. So we do think that there is going to be some significant economic challenges with employment and with businesses failing over the next 6 to 12 months. So we need to consider that the recovery is not going to be a V. It's going to be, at best, it's going to be a U. We're more sceptical about how quickly and how significantly the border with Australia can open and the degree to which that can drive activity. The third opening comment I'll just make is quite a fundamental one in terms of the fact that central government is quite rightly stimulating the economy, spending significantly as it needs to, yet local government and Auckland are contracting. And that's creating a set of dynamics that certainly affects us immediately, but a number of activities across the council group. So in simple terms, APTR, we cannot charge the APTR in the current environment, yet the government is stepping in through Tourism New Zealand to fund domestic campaigns. That means that fundamentally the government is now doing what Aucklanders were doing before. It's good that they're doing it, but it doesn't mean that the outcomes will be the same. And that dynamic is one sort of informs a lot of currently where we sit and where we see government and government activity being really fundamental to, in the short run, how can we take advantage of that? So if we go to the first slide, one of the immediate areas that go past the quote, which I think is reasonably obvious, is responding to dealing with small business. There are about 300,000 Aucklanders who are employed in businesses with 19 or fewer employees. One of the critical ways of reaching that group in terms of supporting them is through the regional business partner program that is delivered through NZ, through New Zealand Tourism, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, and through ATED as the regional partner. They have increased the government, the amount of funding available to support small businesses. That's with advice and helping them to cope with the kinds of challenges that they face. So we as ATED are doing that. We've ramped up considerably, and we've entered into a partnership with the EMA, who are running a call centre and then referring the more challenging or the more opportune cases through to ATED, who are then working with those businesses to get advice to them. So 2,700 businesses, 2.6 million in vouchers have all been generated through this program. It has been, we believe, pretty successful. At this stage, the funding will turn off at the end of May, early June when it runs out. There is possibility it may come back, and there is also talk now of channeling some of the budgets, the government's budget for tourism, that 400 million, through this vehicle and through tourism businesses in Auckland. So that has been a very big focus for us in the short run. If you flick to the next slide, this is working with the Go With Tourism and focusing on some of the other industries we're associated with. Go With Tourism, you may recall, was a program to attract people into the tourism sector, to help to provide the right skills and match opportunities with people. We've immediately turned that around to say, how do we pick up people in the tourism sector who've become redundant and need to be redeployed? And as you'll see from the slide, we've handled 2,000 requests with that. And this has become a national program developed in Auckland, but now funded by MB, and indeed Australia are looking to pick it up and license it there. That might be a future revenue stream, which is another issue to talk about in the future. The film industry is starting to get back on its feet. I see Pam was in the Herald today talking about that, but more importantly, there is actually a significant opportunity.
Nick, we lost you there. If you can just go back on to the start of the maybe two sentences.
Oh, okay. So just that working with the government to increase the attraction of film productions to New Zealand and to Auckland. There is a real opportunity. There's a lot of interest and taking advantage of the COVID-free environment that we now have reached. The Papatūānuku is breathing video. I'm sure 1 million people have seen it. We've pushed it really hard virally. Cantor Research, which is an international market research agency, asked New Zealanders in the last couple of weeks, where will they go when they can travel around New Zealand? Auckland came out the #1 destination, and they speculated in the article in Scoop that this video had something to do with it. So we are skiting, but actually has had an amazing uptake for something that cost almost nothing to make. It is an example of creativity that can be unleashed at this time. And you will have seen the announcement around the NBL bringing its events, consolidated into a championship based in Auckland. There are other sporting codes who are keen to do likewise. Netball is one of those, and we're busy working to try to attract them here and get them into some of our vacant hotel rooms. Turning to the next slide, this is, I think, my last slide. So really what we're trying to do at the moment is how do we attract government money and affect government policy making to the benefit of Auckland. I think that the government has tended to have a view around how it supports the growth of provincial New Zealand. It's really important that the government understand that Auckland is a different sort of economy to the rest of the country. It's 38% of the country, and that during the GFC, I think I'm right in saying this, Auckland actually suffered more than the rest of the country. So if there was an argument 6 months ago that we need to redistribute development across the country, right now I think that the arguments around Auckland require particular attention. And we're concerned that that is understood through the bureaucracy to the political leaders that Auckland requires particular support. So the Auckland Pacific Skills Ship, this is a $22 million program over 3 years that was a pilot that AT developed, and the government have decided to fund through this budget. Construction sector probably doesn't need a lot of explanation. How do we redeploy and how do we provide the skills for particularly the infrastructure, shovel-ready projects. The industry does face some challenging skills issues. It was reliant on migrant labour. That's been shut off quite clearly. How do we get New Zealanders and Aucklanders into that industry? But also there are specific and important skills that we require for things like the CRL. And how can we get a smart border operating so we can get those sorts of people into New Zealand? International students is a particular opportunity. This sector is worth $2.8 billion to Auckland. Right now, there is an opportunity to try and develop a smart border and quarantining opportunities to start getting these students back into Auckland. We are working right now with the universities and the polytechs on taking a case to the government about how that might happen. It's really important to understand that these students, Chinese students in particular, are worth $80,000 each year to Auckland. Stuart McCutcheon told me overnight that 3 of these international students effectively support 1 job. Also, if you talk to Viv Beck, the importance of the students to stimulating and getting the CBD back to life, they play an important role in that. And importantly, I think this is an opportunity to present international students as not as a commodity, as a source of funding for the tertiary institutions. We need to be presenting them as really important to the life of our city and the economic and cultural and social success of the region. So there is an important opportunity to reposition what this is.
Someone killed the call, I think.
Well, you were right in your stride. So if you'd just like to finish that presentation, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, so I was just talking about international students. I think I'd probably pretty much finished what I was going to say on that. It is an immediate opportunity. It's an important one we're working hard on at the moment. A couple more bullet points on my last slide. We are working right now on a campaign to support businesses across the Auckland region. One of the things that we've identified as a really important opportunity is how we encourage Aucklanders to get out and about in their region, to explore it, to understand it, to visit different parts of the region, and for different parts of the region to sell what they're about and tell their stories. So this campaign is going to be really about encouraging that activity. And then the last bullet point is that we're working right now with Tourism New Zealand on a domestic marketing campaign. Tourism New Zealand will create the framework and help to fund it. We will end up providing a lot of the content that fits within that campaign. So I'll stop there. I just want to end with one comment. I've been asked to make this by my team, which is that as you will probably picked up yesterday at the meeting on the budget, we have cut the APTR funding. That isn't a simple case of turning off expenditure that would otherwise have occurred for marketing and major events. This does profoundly affect us across everything we do. So our budget has been reduced by about 25%. We are, on the other hand, going that what is left in that budget, we now need to approach a blank sheet in terms of what is most important in responding to COVID-19, both in the short run and in the medium term. So we are very conscious that we have constrained and limited resources, but that there is a really important job to be done, and we're very keen to be working closely with the council group in how we contribute to the recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Look, in normal circumstances, I'm sure there'd be 100 questions out there. This is a really important topic, and as we get out of the health side of the COVID-19 crisis, we are automatically focused on recovery. And I just make one point. I think, Desley, you had a question on students in the sidebar there. I've been working with Nick and also with Dawn Freshwater, the new Vice-Chancellor of Auckland University, and talking to the Minister of Education. And we're trying to develop a prototype so that we can test a quarantine system to get some of our high-value students back as quickly as possible. So in the next few days, we'll be putting a submission to government to consider whether we may be able to do that. Auckland University is a particularly good candidate because it's got a medical school, and they could run with real knowledge and authority a quarantine program, and they also have testing facilities on site. So there are things there that we want to have happen as quickly as possible. And Nick, you might like just to comment that pilot development scheme for Auckland Pacific Schools, it's a 22 million project. We get a percentage of that. What percentage do we get, and how will you spend that?
So we get a third of the spend, that's AT'd through or the Auckland Council Group, and so that 22 million is over 3 years, so that's probably in the order of $2 million to go into Pacific Skills. They'll probably be relatively generic skills that we're looking to support Pacifica candidates with, rather than necessarily very specific industry-specific skills, but I'm personally not across the detail of that, but I'm very happy to provide the governing body with a lot more information on that.
Thank you very much for that, Nick. Now, look, so we've got the resolution thanking Ian, Phil, and Nick for the briefing this morning. Sharon Stewart, can I ask you to move that, and I will second it. And if you indicate if you've got a really pressing question you'd like to raise, maybe we can take up to 3 to 6. Alf Filipina has been the first one to indicate that he's got a question. Alf.
I've got a comment for both your worship. So the comment to Ian and the 0800 numbers, just to acknowledge Greg Morgan as a result of South Seas and Otara Health and the food parcels. They're delivering 200 a day across with our community that crosses Manukau, Manurewa, Papakura, Mangere, Otara. So just acknowledge to Greg, and also with to you, Nick. Just look if there's any other details. I've been talking to the Minister for Pacific Peoples, and he advised me of the funding that you're referring to. So look, if there's more details, just give us a ring. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thanks very much, Alf. And I've got a question here from Josephine. Josephine Bartley.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is for Nick. Really appreciate all the work that ATED is doing, Nick. I met with my Penrose Business Association, and most of their members haven't accessed any extra advice or help. They're just getting on with it and trying to, get going again. But they did ask me what was council doing to assist a local economic recovery. So is there something that I can share with them? And because I said, well, that would be through ATED. So I just need some more about what can ATED offer our local businesses, please.
Okay, just briefly, Councillor, we can provide more detail around the Regional Business Partner Program. We are going to be running a campaign that is all about supporting those local businesses. This is something that the BID network has asked for, and we do think is really important. But the last thing I'll just say is that we were proposing to put a note out later today summarising in a lot more detail the things we've been talking about.
Thank you very much, Nick. And I think I have a final question here from Councillor Richard Hills. Richard.
Yes, it probably touches on what just Nick said. I guess more information is better for us. We've had a lot of emails and really thorough from ATED about what's happening, but sort of having it all in one place again would be helpful. Some of the things that have been cancelled, some of the things you're still planning for, and all the work you're doing in the small business economic development space, because a lot of people have obviously said, oh, well, ATED obviously doesn't need to exist anymore because there's no tourism, but we all know that it's far greater and far more, and you also need to plan for future tourism. So just be good to have some easy shareable things and information on the significant amount of work you're doing, and also how we can, if we need to advocate, I'm sure your teams are doing it fine, to government to secure that funding, because I do worry that government starts setting up its own schemes in Auckland instead of just either giving the budget or partnering with you guys to ensure that we get all the information and expertise you already have in your organisation, instead of trying to start afresh in the government space who doesn't know Auckland as well as you guys. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. So there is a recommendation on the screen that we receive the report and we can, Mace is in the background there, I know from his comment on the sidebar. So if we can add Mace's name, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 That's enough. To the contrary, no. Carried. Thank you very much, and thank you once again, particularly Nick, for that presentation. Look, I think ATED is, on a much reduced budget because of the accommodation provider targeted rate. You're really stepping up and leading in this area. So thank you very much for what you're doing there. Right, we come to item number 9. And I'll just double check. This is the annual budget 2020-2021 consultation on local board feedback. Now, we had that feedback for 2 hours yesterday in the workshop, and everybody's got a copy of the printed record. So that's on the first round of the consultation. But if I can ask, maybe if I ask Desley if you can move this, and I will second it.
Happy to.
And then Beth and Louise, is there anything further that you want to add on this paper that councillors in the IMSB might not have considered in the discussion yesterday?
Thank you, Your Worship. But just to say, look, I think it's fairly straightforward. It just lists the feedback, particularly around the three targeted rates, which most of the boards supported. There's other information about the other proposals as well. But look, we're happy to answer questions rather than going through the details again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louise. So again, I don't think I'll do a roll call this time because I think most people will be pretty satisfied with what they've got already. But if you can just put a question on the sidebar, and you've got a question, Councillor Henderson. So I'll get you to comment first.
Oh, sorry, yes, not a question. I just wanted to really briefly, just as Deputy Chair of Finance, just publicly thank all the local boards for all the hard work that you've done in this feedback. There's been a hell of a lot of work behind the scenes, and just say I really appreciate the partnership between governing body and local board. So just thank you.
Well said.
Thank you very much. I don't have any further questions or comments. I'll just pause briefly. Sorry,
it's Pippa here. Sorry, it's a bit slow to jump in. May I?
Yes, please, Pippa, go ahead.
This is a question to Louise. Just in terms of the Waitemata's consultation, they included a question about a targeted rate in Newmarket, and there was a bit of a mistake in the consultation material, and the question didn't get elevated to where it was meant to be. And I can't see any mention of the feedback to that in their resolutions. I know this is a very kind of local issue, but is it possible to get a response about what happened to that? Because it was quite a significant question.
Councillor Coombe, if I can just follow up on that and get back to you offline. I haven't got the details on that, but we'll follow up and get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if there's no further comment or question, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. We come through to item number 10, which is the rates and fees issues for the emergency budget. And let me check that I have Andrew Duncan and Eric Wen online. Are you both there, Andrew and Eric?
I'm here, Your Worship.
Okay, you're the key person on this. We've workshopped this, but there may be further questions and comments on it. But if you'd like just to quickly indicate what the paper does, and in the meantime, I'll move and I'll just ask for a seconder for the recommendation on this. I think is that Desley in the background I hear?
Sorry, point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Just briefly, I've got an amendment to 10A, F and to B. I'm just wondering about the process. Do I put that now or what?
Yeah, we'll if we move the recommendation, it may be one that the mover and the seconder would be happy to accept. This relates to including in recommendation AF the wording include a new targeted rate for one walk with BID, which it currently is, and Central Park Henderson.
Yeah.
So we'll put that up. Let me just hear from Andrew first. If there's no problems with that, then we can just absorb that in the recommendation. But I'm not familiar with the arguments around it, and Andrew more likely is. And then I'll call on you first, Shane, to speak to that. So Andrew, if I can ask you to lead off on your presentation, please.
Thank you. So this report's seeking decisions on some minor changes to rates and fees and charges. The consultation took place in February and March, and it includes some proposals to cover costs with increases to waste rates, changes to the rural sewerage service, and new swimming pool fencing targeted rate, amongst other things. The feedback was in support of all the proposals from both the community and the local boards, nearly all of them. The feedback was provided before COVID-19, but the trade-offs for the community and decision makers remain the same. These are all core and regulatory services where the choice for you is to set charges as user pays, to increase general rates or to make additional savings. A couple of changes from the original proposals. Because of COVID-19, we're not going to recommend the introduction of an international visitor entry fee in the Botanic Gardens. And in response to feedback, we're going to make some adjustments to the resource consent fees for large marine farms. On the good question that Councillor Henderson raises about our resolutions, Resolution 10B is having us consult again on the proposal to establish the Central Park Henderson bid. Because of COVID-19, the ballot of the businesses didn't get a 25% return required in our policy, but most of the people responding were supporting the establishment of the bid. We're recommending that rather than do a reballot, we consult again as part of the emergency budget. And we need to do this because to meet the balance of our policy and rating legislative requirements. When we implement B, that's to consult again on the Central Park Henderson bid, we will include the rate in the draft funding impact statement, and that's a requirement of consultation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Andrew. Shane Henderson, if I can ask you to lead off with maybe an explanatory comment around that.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I've got comments and questions actually on this. I'll just briefly, as brief as I can, address the issue. So the Central Park Henderson business community has been consulted at least 3 times on this bid establishment. There's been 2 votes. There's been a consultation through our processes right here, and I believe it's also been through the local board plan when I was the chair. So the consultation has been extensive. So I think we're not discharging an obligation here. The other thing I've got to point out is the cost and the lack of focus involved in consulting again. So especially in terms of the focus, I want us to focus on the emergency budget and some of the big hard decisions that will be affecting all of our communities, and I don't want any distractions on that, and we want to minimise as much as possible that we consult on to that end so that people are talking about the real financial issues. I'll point out that there has been a mandate to pass this bid vote, and the turnout was almost there, and it would have got there without COVID. And so I guess in the form of a question, can I ask questions, Mr. Mayor? Sorry, I'll just seek your guidance.
Yes, no problem. We'll run comments and questions together here.
So I've got 3 questions. So I think it's very important to get the figures on the votes and the turnout. My understanding of the turnout was 23.4% when we need to get 25, so we're 1.6% short. I need to know the percentage of the yes vote, because I think you'll find that if all those 1.6% turned out and voted no, it still would have passed pretty handily. But I'd like the figures on that. That's my first question. The second question is the policy allows for exceptional circumstances with that turnout, and I would argue fairly strongly that COVID plus the mandate that I've said both amount to exceptional circumstances, and therefore there is no handcuff on us putting the bid vote in that the community want. And the third and final question is I want more details on any proposed consultation, but the first 2 are the big questions. So could I get an answer on those?
Councillor Henderson, I the first part of the question, the Skype dropped out. I can answer the second one. 64.2% of those responding, or 64.42% of the respondents were in support of the bid. What was the first question?
Oh no, that's important. To me, that is a clear community mandate. And if 1.6% of the people that didn't vote turned out to vote no, you'd still get a very handy yes vote there. The other one is the bid policy allows for exceptional circumstances. Would you agree that COVID-19 plus the community mandate that we've already received several times together amount to exceptional circumstances in that policy?
I certainly would. However, with these rates and policy things as a legal compliance element, And I'm wondering if one of our legal team, perhaps Katie, if she's on the call, is able to provide you with some additional advice on that.
Yeah, through the chair, it's Meredith Webb here. I'm just calling in on Katie's computer. We've been working with the CCO governance team and the local board in relation to this issue. The consultation document that originally went out specifically referred to the establishment of the bid program and the setting of the targeted rate occurring after a successful ballot, and defined successful ballot as including a return of more than 25% and a more than 50% positive response rate. In our view, in the circumstances where we have previously defined it in that manner, and given the wording of the policy, we would recommend going out and consulting again in relation to this.
So, Councillor Henderson, that's the legal advice. I'd be very reluctant actually to go against legal advice if we are in breach of legal compliance issues. Did you want to make any further comment on that?
Look, I'd respectfully just add my viewpoint that there is an exceptional circumstances clause in there to allow us to pass this amendment, and to me it's extremely clear that it is an exceptional circumstance. And honestly, I think we're being a little bit cautious, but yeah, there are different viewpoints about that. But that's me, and I understand that my fellow Waitakere councillor would like to chip in. I see they're on the chat.
Actually, I have a question.
If you'd like to make a comment at this point.
Sorry, point of order. I've already put my name up to question, and that was prior to Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, and mine was prior to that.
I'm sorry, I see that, but I'd just like, if I may, with your indulgence, both Councillor Simpson and Councillor Mulholland, just dealing with this issue of the Central Park bid, if we can get the comments so we know whether or not we're going to include this suggested amendment. We've heard the desire by local councillors to do it. We've heard some legal advice that there are compliance issues. It would just make sense if I can take Councillor Cooper now on this particular topic and no other topic. So
it is on that topic, Your Worship, and it is a point.
Sorry, okay, Tracy, if you're on the same topic, I'm more than happy to take.
Absolutely. Now, I've been heavily involved in bids for quite some number of years, and I am involved in the West Auckland community. There are a number of bids here. I know some of the businesses, and I believe the first attempt at this did fail, and so I'm not going to be able to support this amendment due to the legality of it, and it is overlaying a proposed targeted rate. Now, whilst I've been a big supporter of bids and remain in that way, I have just had different general commentary prior to this about some being not happy about the process, and that is a general comment. I'm deeply concerned that we would go against the legal advice, and that it is overlaying a targeted rate at this particular time. And given the consultation has been out and has failed previously, I think that's a strong indicator as to the views and opinions. Now, whilst that may not be an opinion of the particular board, there are business people who have multiple businesses in that area and in the FO. I also think, from my years of experience in bid management, the 25%, and I was involved in policy at Manukau when I worked there, actually, that is a very, very low threshold, because you are asking essentially businesses to pay. So I wouldn't be able to support this, because I think it goes against the views and opinions of many of the people that have businesses or own properties in the area. And as I say, because I'm closely involved with RBA, which is in the FO, I have also had that feedback. So kia ora, and thank you for that opportunity, because it is specific, relevant, and we must follow process. And the 25% threshold is extremely low, from my opinion, and I'm still involved with bids. So I think that's expertise driven. Kia ora, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Now, just double check, Councillor Simpson, your comments weren't on this particular issue?
No, they weren't, Your Worship.
Okay, well, with your indulgence, I'll just get Councillor Cooper to make a comment. I think if there's a legal compliance element to this, I think we've probably all agreed that we cannot breach legal compliance requirements. But Councillor Cooper, I'd like to hear from you first on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if you'll indulge me, this has been going on since before amalgamation. One vote frustrated, and in actual fact there is confusion with RBA because an earlier attempt that didn't even get across the line to have a vote was that the Rosebank Association wanted to fold in all of Central Park Henderson, and we know that we can't do bids that include 2 boards. It has to be singular boards, and so that frustrated it, and a lot of people still wanted it, but at a pretty fraught meeting of the community, there was quite a lot of interference because it was not understood by the RBA and other proponents that you couldn't have a bid including 2 boards. You had to have it individually. So that was frustrated. Then they had another vote, but it actually failed because a lot of that confusion. And now we've finally got to this point where Central Park Henderson is a very strong group now. There is no competition, and there should be no competition between Rosebank and Central Park, but some of that has happened, unfortunately, because of misunderstandings about how that a big West Auckland bid couldn't be set up. And so that's why I support this, because it is long needed, and particularly now because, you know, economically things are going to be really tough. We need a leadership model in that Central Park Henderson area. It has it in the form of the business association, but it needs that backup of a bid, and I am very worried about the economic future of this area without that. And I think that absolutely respect Councillor Mulholland's had a lot of experience in this area, but Councillor Henderson and I were very well involved in the earlier failure to even get it off the ground, and we understand the background and why it's been so confused and frustrated. And now the business community are really ready for this, and it's just a shame because of the interruption to consultation that it didn't go well. So that's why I support it. Look, if it fails, it fails. But I mean, I think for Councillor Henderson and I to not support this would be letting down our community. I hope it can go through. And that we can get past that, use the exceptional circumstances. I think it's quite critical. If we go back to consultation on this, it'll just die. People are so fatigued by the whole consultation, and it just all the hurdles it had. I think they just give up, and that would be a disaster. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cooper. Look, I understand Alistair Cameron is on the line with us, and Alistair, you've had some involvement. I'd really like some clear direction. I've listened carefully to Councillors Cooper and Henderson and understand the frustration and the problems. But you know, we're an organisation that sets rules, and therefore we can't be seen to break them. And if we've entered into an undertaking and consulted on that basis and have not met the standard, I don't know that we have much choice. But Alistair, are you able to comment on this? Maybe add to what Meredith has said.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And sorry, I missed the beginning of the discussion. So the bid policy does set a threshold of 25% of return votes to get the mandate to establish a bid. In the current case, there was clear evidence from election services who undertook the ballot on behalf of the business association that the voting turnout was impacted by COVID, and it got very close to that threshold. So when the local board considered whether to recommend striking, establishing the bid and recommending the striking of the targeted rate, they took those exceptional circumstances into consideration. However, just a belts and braces approach and the clear legal advice which was given to the local board at the time is that this should be included in further consultation with the emergency budget, just to make sure that that mandate is still there that the businesses and property owners are still comfortable in a post-COVID world. So,
or you may have finished anyway. Are you still on the line with us?
Yeah, sorry, am I breaking up?
I lost you. It might just have been my, yeah. So, sorry, I didn't hear your last sentence, please.
So look, I think, you know, the clear legal advice is that for this process to be absolutely squeaky clean, we should go out and just consult as part of the emergency budget, just to keep council safe in terms of its decision-making process. We're making a decision which is contrary to the council policy, but falls within the exceptional circumstances allowed for within that policy. And I think we've got to be clear today that the decision today isn't whether to establish the bid and strike the targeted rate. It's just whether to consult on that as part of the emergency budget. So I think we just need to follow the legal advice here.
So just to clarify that, your view and that of our legal advisors is that we should not add the amendment and Central Park Henderson BID?
Yes.
Okay, and the alternative now would be, could you talk us through what the alternative is if we did not include this now? What would have to be done in order to do this according to our policy and to legal requirements?
The resolutions as written are what we work through with our legal team.
So is that including and Central Park Henderson?
No, the original resolution B is what we worked through with our legal team.
Okay.
Through the chair, if I could just note, Your Worship, the local board itself, when resolving to establish the bid program and recommend the setting of the targeted rate to the governing body, has noted that there will be further consultation on this through the emergency budget.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Look, in the circumstances, as the mover of the resolution, on the basis of that advice, I wouldn't be able to absorb that as part of the resolution, and it's really now up to councillors Cooper and Henderson. If notwithstanding the advice they've given, they want to add that as a separate amendment. So could I just have some further advice from you, Councillor Henderson, on whether you want to proceed or not?
Yeah, and I'll take some guidance from my Waitakere colleague, but for what it's worth, I feel it is important to proceed because we're enacting what the community want and have given us a mandate for. And really, this all turns on what you mean by exceptional circumstances. I note the advice and I respect the advice, but I'll also point out that, in my view, exceptional circumstances have easily been met. And so I feel very strongly that I want to keep the amendment in, but at the same time, I'll take guidance from my Waitakere colleague.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. I just had a question. Is it possible to put an F and consult on a Central Park Henderson bid, but do it in the process of this consultation and do a bit of targeted to the businesses to do it that way? I just really worry that this community will just be exhausted by this process and the whole thing will fall apart. And I feel very sad that we haven't got any other West Auckland support here, because this is just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of businesses, large, medium, and small, that need some structure to get ahead. So yeah, I mean, it's up to you, Mr. Chair, to include it or not, but I'm just wondering if we can say, rather than include a targeted rate, or just consult on a Central Park Henderson bid, but in a kind of a modified way if that met some, because of the exceptional circumstances.
So I'll just ask Alistair and Meredith if they've got any comment on that. So that would then read and consult with.
And could I just, on the exceptional circumstances point first, we accept that this is exceptional circumstances, It is just the manner in which the policy has been drafted which makes us consider that it would be appropriate to undertake that further consultation. On the point about amending F, we wonder whether we could add, include a new targeted rate and Central Park Henderson bid subject to further engagement on this issue, or subject to further engagement.
Would that be separate from, because Walkworth don't need one, but yeah, it would be specific to Central Park. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I'd be happy with that. Would you?
I think.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll make this a separate, maybe a G, and G becomes H, so we don't confuse the targeted rate about one Walkworth.
Perfect.
Okay, I think we may have a solution to that then. So, and Sandra, you're still trying to get the right wording. I'll get Meredith just to repeat the wording there, please. Include a new targeted rate for Central Park Henderson BID, subject to further engagement.
That's right. Could be with affected businesses.
With affected businesses, okay. Okay, I'll just double check. The seconder of this resolution, I think, was Desley Simpson. Are you happy to accept that as part of the recommendations, Desley?
Well, I don't know that I'm seconding them yet. I've got a question, so you might want to get somebody else.
Okay. Sorry, I thought it was you that had seconded the recommendations. We didn't hear clearly who seconded the recommendation, so can somebody volunteer as the seconder, please?
I'll be brave, Mr. Chair. I will. Linda Cooper.
Okay, Councillor Cooper, thank you. Okay, let's. You're obviously happy with that, so we'll add that in the way that's been indicated, and I'll come back now to questions and Councillor Simpson.
Look, thanks, Your Worship. I've just got a question around Roman numeral 2A and B. When we went out, there's no doubt when we went out for consultation, it was clear as to the response that was positive. But we went out with a consultation on 3.5% pre-COVID, and in taking on the response to both the waste base service and the refuse rate, that was all based on that, and people knew the impact of that. We're now going out on 3.5 and 2.5, and I just want to know the legal issues around we haven't. Where do we explain what the impact is of those rates on 2.5? Look, I say that because, of course, Manukau City Council impact on 3.5 is 4.56 and Auckland City Council is 4.39. But my understanding from Andrew is we haven't got that information for 2.5, and somehow I think it should be referenced in the consultation document. And what this wording actually does is it takes it as we're going to do it, it's based on 3.5, we're going to do it. I just think that's a bit predetermined. Can I just seek some legal advice on that?
Andrew, would you or Meredith like to comment on that, please?
I won't comment on the legal advice, but I would note that the impact in dollar value and percentage terms is the same.
Okay. Does that satisfy you, Councillor, or would you like some comment from Meredith Webb from a legal perspective?
I just like the legal because, of course. Okay.
Let's see if Meredith has got a comment on that.
Through the chair, it's Katie Bexley here. So from a legal perspective, we don't see there as being any impediment to the council taking decisions on these matters that are before you today. The key thing from our perspective is that people are clear on what is within the scope of decisions to be made following any further consultation. And the consultation document will need to make it clear what decisions have already been taken and what is still on the table in terms of that further consultation. So if the councillors were to make a decision on these waste targeted rates today, the consultation document would make that clear, and then these figures would feed into the baseline budget that the consultation document would be based on.
So there's no further opportunity, even though this was all done pre-COVID and life was sweet and everything was good and everyone was happy probably with 3.5, or we saw the feedback on that. Everyone was happy with these rates. There's no legal reason why we need to, if we make a decision now, that's it. We're not ever going to look at this again in the emergency budget. Is that what you're saying? No legal reason to look at this again because we've already had the feedback on it. I just want to be 100% clear.
So our view is that that's correct. That there's no legal impediment to taking these decisions today. And as Andrew said, the reasons behind these decisions and the impacts are the same, even after the impact of COVID. However, if councillors did want to retain scope to revisit any of the decisions taken today, we would suggest taking a sort of soft approach to any further consultation on that so that the scope of consultation is really clear. But that could leave room for councillors to consider any further feedback on particular issues, and that would be open to the councillors to do that if they wished.
So if we were to follow that line that you've just mentioned, what words would need to change in the resolution?
Katie, are you there? It's a deafening silence at the moment.
Sorry, my mic was muted. Similar to the way that the Central Park Henderson bid has been dealt with there, we would suggest that if in relation to any specific matters that councillors wanted to leave room for considering further feedback, that there could be words added to the specific matters that the decisions are taken subject to consideration of any further feedback. And then that would be reflected in the consultation document to make that clear to people giving feedback.
Thank you. I'll think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, just double check, Councillor Mulholland, you've already made the comment that you wanted to before. That was in relation to the bid. You didn't have a separate comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. And the only reason I speak on this, because I've been an incredibly strong supporter of bids for nearly 20 years, and I was involved in leading the team actually at Waitakere when Henderson came about. So whilst I absolutely understand the comments of the other councillors that have spoken and put this up and understand it, I believe that it is a low threshold in the policy, that isn't a clear mandate, that some of the feedback I have received, and yes, I'm well aware, Your Worship, of the scenario with RBA. I have been involved actually for quite some years myself in that process. I feel in this time of COVID, what we are doing is an overlay of a targeted rate on a business. And by the councillor commenting about community support, I would say that I would need to see evidence of that, because I would have to dispute that, because this is a business owner, a property owner, a targeted rate. They do have an association, and we should trust that group to work closely together. And if it has failed in the past, which it has, and it has failed again, I just am extremely concerned. And as someone who has been one of the biggest supporters of bids from many years back, working in Manukau, having established many bids in Manukau and Waitakere and involved, it just deeply concerns me that I won't be able to support this, because I feel it is our duty legally, and we are obliged to do the right thing, follow policy. And what we're essentially doing is asking people to pay an additional targeted rate for multiple years, or until it got voted out. So I've always been a big supporter of the bids, so that's why there are specific reasons. And if we vote for something when there is clear evidence against it, and then we're asking people to pay an additional targeted rate and a fee when there is already an organisation that should be trusted to work together to garner support, then I would say that that goes against the grain of doing the right thing. So, big supporter, perhaps we could give them a grant. That's another option, which I can't see it happening now, but that could be another option, Your Worship, to assist or help out, or perhaps AT could undertake some additional work. So I thank you very much for the opportunity. I certainly understand the circumstances, and I'm a supporter of bids and that work, but in this case, I wouldn't be able to support that. But I'm happy to answer any of your questions, Your Worship, or of others on any other reasoning. Kia ora, thank you.
Thank you. If necessary, we can take, if there's a divided view on this, we'll take G as a separate vote, when we can do that by division. Councillor Walker, I think you've got a question on the same question, and maybe Councillor Collins as well. So let's just try and deal with this item first, and then I'll come back. I've got calls, Councillor Watson and Dalton. Yes, Councillor Walker, I can hear you fine. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I've got, I share the concerns that Councillor Mulholland is raising. I've got a concern around the wording in G, which to me is rather vague. So, subject to further engagement with affected businesses, which affected businesses? What is the nature of the engagement? Is this going to be compliant with policy? I just have a real concern that wording is insufficiently accurate. We have had a process. That process to date has failed. So I'm making the assumption that subject to further engagement is actually following the correct process. If that is not the case, and there is some difference here, then the wording should reflect that, and we should all know that.
Okay, my understanding from Katie is that would be legally compliant with the wording that it has at the moment, but there will be an opportunity to vote on G if you have concerns about that, to not support it if that's your view. Okay, I think Councillor Collins, your question's been asked already.
It is still unclear.
What I'm working on, Councillor Walker, is that our legal advisors have said that this would be compliant with the legal requirements on us. And affected businesses, I guess they are any businesses that might be affected by the establishment of the bid. Okay, I'll come back now to Councillor Watson. Question or comment?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. No, it's actually it's not on this specific.
No, that's okay. On whatever, on the whole paper.
Okay, so I'm just really wanting to see what on the screen what is D and E, the recommendations. I can't see it. So if you could just scroll up.
Oh, okay. Is that okay? Can you see that now?
Yes. So let me just have a look. Okay, so you know, in terms of E, officers were going to see you, E2, E1 in fact, and along similar lines to the advice that's just been given, add subject to consideration of any further feedback received in this issue. Now that doesn't appear there. I don't want to go into the whole convoluted sequence of events that's arisen to that, but that's what I was assured was going to be included, that phrase, which has just been mentioned now by one of the officers to deal with a particular consultation issue that has occurred in Whenuapai. Now, so I really want to know why that hasn't been included, as was indicated yesterday, without having to go into a detailed recounting of what led to that. It's quite a simple, straightforward, pragmatic adjustment that allows people to feed back in the manner they were assured that they were going to be by council officers, and for that decision then to be subject to consideration of that feedback. So the same phrase that was just mentioned previously.
Okay, so your suggestion is that add to E2, or no, E1 I think it is subject, or sorry, is this the whole change that you're looking for?
Sorry, yeah, so that's it down the bottom there, Mr. Mayor. So is that going to be included then? That's already. So
can I have some comment from Andrew Duncan on that, please?
I understand that just prior to the decision to consider these issues now rather than in July, there was advice that they might be included, that this might be included again in the emergency budget consultation, and then subsequently the council's made a decision to make these decisions now. That one ratepayer group who had already provided a submission and been heard at a local board meeting is concerned that they've missed out on that further opportunity they thought they were going to have.
Excuse me one second, Andrew. There are people, somebody's got their mic on and there's a lot of background noise. Can you please make sure when you're not speaking you've got your mic off for the convenience of everybody else? Andrew, please continue.
Yes, I will. So did you hear that? Everyone hear what I just said?
Oh, okay.
So as one ratepayer had been advised they might have a further opportunity to speak just before the decision to have their views considered in further consultation, just before the decision was made to consider these issues at this meeting, and they're disappointed they wouldn't have had that. Although they had already had they had already made a submission and been heard by the local board on this issue, is my understanding.
No, there's actually a little bit more to it than that, Mr. Mayor. But as I said, that was assurance that was given to me yesterday to deal with this circumstance that has arisen. That I'm happy to talk to if you want me to, but the officers told me that there was no problem in adding that phrase there that would meet the demands of the Ratepayers Association and their community. It's not one ratepayer, it's an entire Ratepayers Association and the community they represent. So it's a little bit more than just one person. And there is a background of events and statements, all detailed, that go to council providing that assurance to them. Now, as I said, I don't want to litigate that, but I will do if I have to, justify that in that way. But that assurance was given to me yesterday that this would happen without too much fuss. So I'm just curious as to why now it hasn't appeared in the recommendations as promised.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Look, I'm sorry, I wasn't privy to any discussion or assurance that's given, but if I can just maybe put to Andrew again, is there what if any problem would there be with the addition of that clause under E2? It would obviously, it would then mean that you would have the further opportunity by this group to make submissions if for some reason, and I don't know what the reason might have been, they weren't able to do so in the first instance.
That wouldn't create a major issue.
Okay, so
you'll be able to consider their submission again at the decision in the middle of July.
Okay, again, I'll ask my seconder, but are you happy with the inclusion of that clause under E2, Councillor Simpson?
I'm not your seconder.
Councillor Cooper, sorry. Councillor, still got that in mind. Councillor Cooper?
My question was, I sort of, it feels a bit, it doesn't feel very clear from Councillor Watson. I thought that everybody had consultation and we've received back the information. That's why I don't understand why it needed further consultation. That was I don't understand.
Okay, perhaps if
we've actually
Councillor
had the
Watson...
consultation back and the figures from Upper Harbour and Henderson Massey as well as Waitakere.
Okay, I'll just give Councillor Watson another chance to answer that, and then if you weren't wishing to add that, then we would need to make that an amendment.
Yeah, okay, and I'll be happy to do that. So just briefly, we're talking about the Whenuapai Ratepayers Association, and there's been a sequence of events concerning this proposal to end the sewage pump out and targeted rate. Auckland Council, during the period of consultation, councilled the public community meeting between the council and Whenuapai community. They were then unable to facilitate a public video conference that was scheduled to appear on the community Facebook page. The community were then unable to attend the Upper Harbour Local Board Forum to provide feedback. They've requested further information from the council regarding all this, which has not been provided, and there is real questions over the extent to which the communications in the form of the documentation got out to all affected parties. So there is a very strong contention that large numbers of people actually missed out getting the documentation required to submit on that. And this was all conveyed to council and to me way back at the start of April, at which point I, as the ward councillor, wrote to relevant council officers saying this is the situation, there is going to be a second round of consultation. Is it going to be possible for this group to be consulted upon in that round of consultation? And the response came back from council at that point was yes, they would be able to feed back into this emergency budget consultation, and that feedback will be considered at that point. So at that stage, and that was mid-April, I told them this was a council decision, that they would be able to submit, it would be considered, and they have proceeded on that basis. So subsequent to that, then there was this recommendation, which of course essentially removed that assurance that had been given to them both by me as the councillor and by council officers. So as a means round this,
I'm comfortable, Councillor Watson. That's fine, as long as our Healthy Waters, usually Andrew Chin goes and does this. If he's available to do that really good information sharing, I'm fine with that.
Yeah. So it's a pragmatic compromise that Mr. Duncan said is he's fine with, Mr. Mayor. So I think it's not it doesn't need to be made into a big issue.
No, that's fine. Look, I think that explanation is helpful. If that assurance was given, then we should honour the assurance. I mean, my own view on it is very clear about not subsidising the sewage pump out. But if that assurance was given about further consultation, then both by yourself and by officers, then I think we should honour that. I have a further question about that from Councillor Henderson. I see you've just withdrawn that. Okay, so with the agreement of the seconder, that's now incorporated in the recommendations. Right, Councillor Dalton, I think we come to next.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I just want to go back up to the targeted rates, A and B, and my questions were somewhat answered. Councillor Simpson had asked them, and we got some advice on it. So the legal advice is that we don't need to go back out and consult, and I think the reasoning for that is because the impacts are the same. But the impacts are the same, but the financial environment is very different now for the ratepayers. Now, I think it was Katie that said that there would be something in the consultation material, and I just want to sort of tease out what that is, because it's not about the legality of it. The legality, it sounds like it's been covered. I support the fees and charges. I know they're necessary to deliver the services that we need to deliver, but I want to make sure that we're transparent. And I want to just have a bit of a discussion as to whether that is about the residents having another chance to have a say or whether providing the information on the already agreed rates is enough, and what that looks like in the consultation document. So it's more of a ethical, I'm not saying anyone around the table is unethical, but it's more of a it's transparency. That is what I'm looking for, and that the ratepayers truly understand what we are going to be putting into the budget when we go into it in July. So I think my question at the end of all of that is, what does the information look like that is going in the consultation document? And do councillors feel that we need to be asking the question again, or was the pre-COVID consultation enough from a transparency perspective?
Andrew, have you any comment that you'd like to make on that?
I understand that the consultation document will include reference to the decisions that have been already been made, and clearly these are the ones that would, I assume, would headline that. So it'll be clear to people the decisions that you've made about the base and waste management rate and the refuse rate. In terms of the effect on the ratepayers, that remains relatively similar whether we fund it from the general rate or the targeted rate. They're pretty close in terms of their impact.
Perhaps if I can just ask another question on that, Andrew. Except, as Councillor Dalton has said, the impacts are the same, the financial environment is different, but there was, I think, a very clear majority, 2/3 in favour of both A and B and a quarter opposed. But if we weren't to proceed in the way recommended, then we'd simply be putting overall rates up to meet those costs. And wasn't this a question of equity between, firstly, in regard to Auckland City and Manukau, that those of us living in the old legacy areas would, in the event of a general rate going up, have our rate collection subsidised by those living in the other legacy areas? Wasn't that the issue?
Yes, there'd be a bit of that. Plus, if we put these increases through the general rate, we'd end up shifting another $4 million of rates onto businesses. We would be charging some of this cost to 37,000 ratepayers who don't receive the service, and the difference will probably be about, instead of a 1% increase in the sort of Auckland Manukau area, it'll still be 0.75. So we're talking a move of 10 to 20 cents a week between the two options in those areas, and it would remain pretty similar, a little bit more elsewhere.
Okay, I think that's very clear as an answer. Now, I don't think I have any further questions indicated or comments. So what I'll... I'm sorry?
There was, Your Worship, myself.
Oh, Alf, I'm sorry, I missed you there. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's in regards to G, and the question is, the recommendation is to amend. Now, what process will be followed to go out to the Central Park Henderson bid area? Is it the same process that they have done previously? Because when I read G, it straight away I'll be looking at including new targeted rate for the Central Henderson bid. That'll be the first thing that'll be catching my mind. So, Andrew, is the process that has been put out previously going to be the same process when it goes out to further engagement?
So we would include reference to it in the consultation document, and we've already written letters to go to all the members of the Business Association asking them to let us know their views. So we're already drafted and ready to go with that, encouraging them to respond. And we'd go to the Business Association as well, obviously, and get them to work with their members.
So would that include the fact that we've made a decision to include it as a new targeted rate, subject to would that wording be included, or would you just use the same process that you have already
Good point. I suppose we would make reference to the decision that the council's made and the council's desire to get their feedback before they make a final decision.
So would that? Okay, I'm just sort of looking at preempting and telling the bid, the Central Park Innocent shops, businesses there, saying, look, council's already made, at this stage are approving the new target rate, what do you think? And just preempting an answer,
I think,
which is predetermined.
I think, Councillor Filipaina, we would include it subject to the feedback we got from them. So it's a conditional improvement. It's not, we're going to do this anyway, but tell us what you think. It's, we're going to do this provided there is support for it, is how I would read it.
Yeah, I just hope that it's clear. The communication is clear to those businesses, Your Worship. So
I agree entirely. Yeah, and I think that needs to be correct. I've got further questions or comments. Councillor Simpson.
Oh, take the questions first, Your Worship, please.
Okay, Councillor Henderson, a question.
Sorry, thanks for your indulgence. And following on from Councillor Filipaina's excellent question, who approves it after the feedback's actually come in? And just to point out that this won't be the first time the businesses have heard about this, that this has been, I don't know, 10 years plus in the making. So who says, yep, okay, that's the feedback, tick? Is it us or the local board?
I would assume.
Through the chair, it's Meredith Webb here. It'll come back to a governing body. At this stage, the local board has approved the establishment of the bid program. So the next step is for the targeted rate to be set. So the way that the engagement is happening is really outlining clearly and openly that our view is that despite the 25% threshold not being reached, you know, we consider that there are exceptional circumstances and it's appropriate to proceed on. And on that basis, we've taken this decision in principle, subject to obtaining further views from those affected businesses. So that's the manner in which we would be presenting it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that helps clarify it. Councillor Sayers, also a question.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Just going back to the paper item 14, which talks about the other fees. I'm just bringing it up myself. There's a bullet point there just talking about changes to some of the consent fees and deposits to align with actual costs and to improve customer experience. So just to gain some clarification around that, obviously that's a financial implication, but in terms of the customer experience and the time, the 20 days that we usually look at for processing a consent, could I just gain some reassurance that that hasn't been extended or would be extended, or will it be staying the same, or we've been trying to shorten that as part of this proposal? The main driver for my question, Worship, is just feedback to the industry that we've moved from 20 days to 40 days over this COVID period, which I wasn't aware of as a councillor. So I just want to gain some reassurance that that there aren't being changes made to that 20 days processing time, and any further information we might gain around that concern.
So the proposed changes to these fees don't change those times. They're about getting the deposits closer to what people will actually end up paying is one of the key things. I'll ask Kevin Smith if he's available to answer about the time issue as well.
Are you there, Kevin?
Yes, through the chair. The time frame extension that you're talking about is when an application has not been worked on during that close down period. So as Andrew indicated, we don't anticipate there being any actual change in the actual charges to customers. It's just about getting that deposit at a more appropriate level so they know up front what the likely charge will be.
Okay, Your Worship. Maybe officers could come back to me offline if it's easy for them to check. But obviously, my main concern is around current changes to timelines, and therefore, getting projects, going. And I hope we're not holding it up accidentally internally, Your Worship. That's the angle I'm coming from.
Okay, understand that. I think it's clear that this proposal doesn't do in itself anything about timelines. The timeline was to do with the lockdown period. Perhaps if you talk directly to Kevin Smith, if there's any residual problems you've got with that councillor, you may be able to sort that out directly. Okay, so we come back to Councillor Simpson. I think the final request for.
Look, no, it was just a comment. Look, I'm probably on a hiding to nothing. It's not that I don't agree with the feedback and the targeted rates. I just think we're in a new world post-COVID, and I suppose if A and B had, subject to consideration of any further feedback, it's not asking for reconsult. It's just making people aware in the consultation document that those decisions had been made. That's all I'm saying. I'm chair of your finance committee, Your Worship. I want to be as open and transparent as possible. We consulted on extra charges well before COVID-19, and just ethically, it's not right to me to absolutely approve them without just stating it somewhere in the consultation material. So if you could indulge my ethics and add subject to consideration of any further feedback, I'd be very grateful. If you're not happy to do that, I will abstain from the vote on those two issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Look, I'm more than satisfied that that people have had a chance to be consulted, but I'm not averse to people being able to, we won't have a separate consultation line on those issues yet again, but if we've got reference to that in the consultation document, and then people are able to make any comment, as in all of our normal consultation documents, I think we could do it that way. Andrew, do you have a difficulty with that?
I don't have if the councillors wish to, certainly reference to these will be included in the consultation document.
Yep.
If it's subject to consideration of further feedback, and that's giving you the opportunity to adjust these, it just obviously adds another layer to the decision-making complexity you'll have to address in July. And so it's
Well, sorry, what I was suggesting is that my understanding is that reference will be made in the consultation document to this, but not with a separate line to reconsult on what we've already consulted, but people that did have a concern with that would have the ability to comment within the general comment section.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, okay. No, I think we might have, if you're happy with that, Councillor Simpson.
I really appreciate that. So, Sandra, that would go with A and B. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I make a comment as a seconder?
Yep,
I understand absolutely, Councillor Simpson's. It's really important to be transparent. I'm just wondering, given Andrew's comments about that if it could well be a whole another rejig if it was changed again, the end is it's not so much further feedback, but the concern was that it was clearly indicated to our public that all of these had been consulted on before. Here it is. Rather than another, because this to me opens up a whole another round of consultation. That was my concern, that it becomes subject to it, rather than making sure people are clearly told, yes, we've consulted on this, so here it is, but now we've got some other things, very important things to consult on. That's I'm very worried about this being completely opened up again in terms of
well, you're included in your targeted rates.
Sorry, through the chair, please.
I get what you're saying. I was just listening to what Andrew said, because this goes to a budget rejig if we change it. But I guess it's fine if it goes across the line. Fine. I just don't know how we're going to handle it at the other end after Andrew's comments. And given we all know how pressurised this is with the finance staff.
Yeah, I'll reiterate my comment and just
subject to further consideration. That is a resolution that would allow for further consideration, which is slightly different from showing that we're still open to listen, which is...
Okay, I've got a couple of other comments on this. Let's, Councillor Collins first. Councillor Collins, are you on the line with us? Okay, I'll go to Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'm grateful for what Councillor Simpson has raised. I accept that we're not starting again in relation to all of this, but it is quite important.
I'm sorry, Councillor Newman, we've lost you for the moment. You're probably still there, so...
Yep, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yep.
Yep. Look, I just think it's quite important that we do in the consultation reflect that, yes, we've discussed this matter with you previously. Well, we've raised this issue for consultation. That was pre-COVID-19. We are looking to proceed with this, but it will be important for those of us in the areas affected to point out that the budget scenarios that we are consulting on, these in effect deliver about a 1% more on top of the scenarios included, which will be a cost on our ratepayers. And that is something that we need to ensure that we spell out very clearly, because I am sure that people will want to comment on that and provide feedback. We should welcome that, and we should be as clear as we can that that is the actual impact on them. It is more than just a nominal rate increase, if that's what we're going to do, but this will be on top of that, and it will have a material impact. So if that is something that we can transparently reflect and provide for comment from our community, yeah, there'll be some hard feedback, I'm sure, but it is better that we spell that out because I think that transparency at this time is really important.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Collins, I can assure you we haven't muted your phone at this end. Can you take your call now?
Can you hear me now, Mayor?
I can hear you perfectly. Thank you,
brilliant.
Councillor.
Thank you. Thanks, HQ as well. Hey, look, I just wanted to say that I endorse the comments in the suggested amendment that's been put forward by Councillor Simpson. I haven't had the chance to discuss this with Councillor Filipina, but both the local boards of Otara Papatoetoe and Māngere Otahuhu came back with pretty convincing results on that original piece of consultation, which showed a general support for the increase in the targeted rates. But further to that, when we discussed it some more, both Chair Foley and Chair Lemonga said to me that they completely understood and they were aware that often our communities just kind of take on the extra cost. So they understood that completely. But they did say if there was the opportunity for people to offer more feedback, then that would be considered as well. And so I don't think this is going to, I personally do not believe that this is going to change the position of the two local boards that I've referred to. But what it does do is it gives people the opportunity, granted the way it's worded, just for further consideration to be made. So I'm happy for it as it stands, because I think it's an opportunity just to see if people have changed their minds, let's hear about it. I'm not personally of the view that there'll be a major shift out these ways, but there could be, but I just think that I'm happy for it to go ahead. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So the wording is there, and I've indicated what my understanding of that wording is, and that's been confirmed by Andrew Duncan. So I have no other...
Your Worship, it needs to be for B as well.
Yeah, it needs to be consistent with B. I've just mentioned that to Sandra, and she's about to make that change. We come now to the vote. What I'm going to suggest, Councillor Councillor Filipina.
Yeah, sorry, I put it in the side column, so I don't know what's happened with the comment.
No, it has come up, but I'm sometimes focusing on what's happening on the screen and not on the sidebar. So, Councillor Filipina, the call's yours.
Just very shortly, very short. I agree with Councillor Collins, but I just wanted to again find out that are we going to do it, because Andrew said that there's a difference with what the further feedback is instead of what you're indicating, Your Worship. I just wanted to end up having and ensuring that it's not going to be separately in our documentation in regards to A and B, but it just offers up for further comment that you referred to, Your Worship.
Thanks, Councillor. Your understanding is right. There won't be a separate provision to revisit the whole thing. It will be mentioned in the consultation that these have been consulted on and agreed to, but that will be anybody that wants to comment on that, if they believe that the circumstances have changed, will be able to do in the general comment section.
Through you, Chair, it's Kate Bexley here. I wonder if I can just jump in briefly, just on that wording. The way we envisage that flowing through into the consultation document is, as you say, it won't necessarily be included as a specific issue in the consultation document, but where the consultation document outlines what decisions have been taken in relation to the first round of feedback, it will there identify that these particular matters have been agreed in principle, subject to consideration of any further feedback. And that then leaves it open to you as decision makers following that second round of feedback to revisit any decisions if you consider that's appropriate in light of any further feedback that is received on those issues.
Thank you, Katie. I think that's very clear now. What I'd like to do is take the vote, but there's been a request for a division on G. So what I'm suggesting, subject to any view expressed by councillors, is to take everything other than A, G on the voices and then take G on a division. But if there's a request for a division overall, I would obviously accept that. But
Can I just ask one more question? Sorry. About G?
Yep. Okay, G, one more question.
Is it true that Henderson is the only town centre in Auckland without a bid?
Pretty much.
Oh, Skype's not happy today, It's dropping everybody.
Yeah, everybody's gone again.
Just did it again to me.
I don't know what's causing this. So we'll just wait till everybody's back online, because this is a pretty important part of the meeting. It's where we're going to take a vote. So I just want to make sure that everybody is back. In fact, I may even have to do a roll call to double check that, given that we are about to take a vote.
Sorry, I missed the answer to that question from Councillor Simpson as well.
Yeah, the answer I saw in a sidebar comment, I think from Councillor Dalton, is that there are others that are in that situation. That Takanini doesn't have a bid, and Clendon doesn't have a bid, and Penrose, according to Councillor Bartley, doesn't have a bid.
I think we need to distinguish Metro Centre rather than Town Centre.
Anyway, I'm not sure that is critical to the vote that we're going to take. It's a point of information, really. Look, I'd better do a roll call first, otherwise I'm in danger if not.
Chairman, point of order.
Yeah, point of order. Councillor Casey.
I'm a wee bit lost as to any changes to the recommendations as I have them before me in the document. That's a wee problem because I can't see.
Oh, okay. So Well, I'll get them put up on screen again because I don't have them written on in a hard copy, and I'll go through that while we're just waiting to see that everybody's joined back in. So, Sandra, if I can get you to put that back on screen, and I'll just walk you through them, Councillor.
Thank you.
So, sorry, it's just taking a little while to do this. While we're getting that back on screen, maybe I can just do a roll call and check that everybody is here. Deputy Mayor Cashmore?
Yes, sir.
Josephine Bartley?
Yes, I'm here.
Kathy is there. Efeso Collins?
Yes, sir.
Pippa Coombe?
Yes, I'm here.
Linda Cooper? Just double checking. Is Linda Cooper on the line? Okay, we'll just have to wait for Linda to get back on. Angela Dalton?
Yes, I'm here.
Chris Darby?
I'm here.
Al Filipina?
Present, Headmaster.
Chris Fletcher?
Present.
Shane Henderson?
Kia ora.
Richard Hills?
Hi, I'm here.
Mook Honek?
Oh, kia ora, Your Worship. He's had trouble all day, so I've let him go.
Okay, so that's fine. I'll get you to speak for the IMSB, all on your own. Tracy Mulholland? We got Tracy on the line? No. Daniel Newman? Don't appear to have Daniel there either. Greg Sayers? Desley Simpson? No, we have a problem here. Sharon Stewart, I think I've seen. Yep, you're back. David Typley, I've heard from. Wayne Walker. John Watson.
Back on, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And Paul Young.
Yes, I'm here, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we've got a problem here because I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 councillors missing. So 5 now. So while we're waiting for the other councillors to come back on, if I go through with Councillor Casey, who's on the phone and can't see the screen, the changes are as follows.
I've just been sent the amendments by Sandra.
Okay, you've got them. That's fine. That saves me the problem. Now let's just double check. Sandra, if we've still got councillors missing. So Linda, you're back. Councillor Walker's back. Okay, I'll just check the other 4. Councillor Mulholland, are you on the line with us? Councillor Newman?
Yes, hello.
Thank you. Councillor Sayers? And Councillor Simpson?
Have you got me, Mr. Mayor? Councillor Sayers?
I got you now. And Councillor Simpson? Desley, are you on the line with us? Okay. I'm just going to suggest we take a break at this point. We are about to vote. Every councillor needs to be on, and the failure of technology shouldn't be a reason why people can't cast their vote. So I'll just double check before we take that break.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just a quick point of order. If you can hear me.
Okay, that's Councillor Henderson.
Yes, thank you. Sorry to hog the mic, as it were. I understand that we're taking a division on G, which is fine. I just want clarity on if that is voted down, what happens to the targeted rate itself? Because that's the whole thing in there.
If it's voted down, then we have not approved the targeted rate.
Okay.
If it's voted down, you could still go with B.
Sorry, B being, Andrew, can you? Oh, okay. Sorry, yeah, you're quite right, Andrew. Under Councillor Henderson under B, it's agreed to consult further on the establishment of the Central Park Henderson bid and the associated targeted rate, but there will be no targeted rate approved if G is voted down. And if G is voted up, there will be a targeted rate subject to the further engagement demonstrating positive support for that at the level required.
Okay, cool.
Okay, I think we're still missing Councillor Mulholland and Councillor Simpson are both missing. Desley, you're on now?
I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, look, I'm just going to get a message sent through to Tracy Mulholland. Can I suggest we just take a 5-minute break now and we'll come back? So don't hang up. Hold in there. Take the chance to make a cup of tea, and we'll be back with you in let's make it 4 minutes past midday, just to be precise. Okay, thank you. your screen. So, oh, sorry, Wayne may not be with us. Wayne, are you? Just waiting for Councillor Walker.
Your Worship, just
Can you hear me?
Can I have a question of clarification?
Can you hear me, Phil?
Yep, sorry, I'll just deal. Yes, we've got you, Councillor Walker and Councillor Filipaina. Just before we take the vote, clarification.
So I'm on phone, but not Skype.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Filipaina, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, I just the question of clarification with G. If G doesn't pass, did you say that we then revert back to B as we had in the original recommendations, and then we end up going back to the others that H becomes G? Is that what you?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. If G is to fail, then I would consider that B. Well, I'd probably have to actually move that B be incorporated. The old B be reincorporated is the way I think I'll do that. Okay, so at the moment, councillors, we're voting on the voices on everything other than AG. So I'll put the recommendation excluding G. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. Declare that carried. I'll now put G separately, and should that fail, I will then move to reinstate the original B, which is to agree to consult further on the establishment of the bid and the associated targeted rate. So I'll ask Sandra now to call a division on G.
Councillors, you are voting on clause A to G as it is on the screen in front of you. Can you be clear with your responses, please? Mayor Goff.
Aye.
Councillor Bartley.
Sorry, can you please clarify? I thought this was just about G.
Yeah, this is a division on G. Include a new targeted rate for Central Park Henderson bid, subject to further engagement with affected businesses.
Yeah, sorry, it's because she said A to G. That's why I thought we were doing
no, A Roman numeral 2.
A to G.
G. Yeah.
Sorry, yes.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm going to abstain. I'm sorry, Shane and Linda. I want to support you guys, but I don't know enough about it.
Thank you. Abstention.
Councillor Casey. I'll come back to Councillor Casey.
She might need a manual unmute.
She'll be by telephone.
She is. Councillor Casey?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Aye.
Councillor Collins.
Abstention.
Thank you. Councillor Coombe.
Aye.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Dalton.
Against.
Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Filipaina.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
Against.
Councillor Henderson.
Aye.
Councillor Hills.
Aye.
Councillor Mulholland.
Against.
Councillor Newman.
No.
Councillor Sayers.
No.
Councillor Simpson.
Abstain.
Councillor Stewart.
No.
IMSB Chair Taipere.
Abstain.
Councillor Walker?
No.
Thank you. Councillor Watson?
Abstain.
Councillor Young?
Abstain.
So that was carried 9 votes to 7 with 6 abstentions.
Thank you very much, councillors. So that's carried. Just to repeat, 9 votes to 7 with 6 abstentions. We come now to the item number 11, which is rates postponement for properties affected by COVID-19. And I'll just double check. I've got Andrew Duncan, Aaron Matic and Beth Sullivan on the line. Andrew, are you there with your team? That does create a difficulty for us.
Hi, Andrew here, having turned his mic on. So just me today.
Thank you. Right, and this is a paper that would normally have gone to F&P committee. I'm happy to move. Councillor Simpson, will you second, please?
Yes, I will.
Okay, so I'll ask Andrew again just to outline what the paper involves, and then we'll have a chance. I think on this paper I'm going to revert, given the experience in the last one, back to just doing it on a roll call basis. So, Andrew, the floor's yours.
Good afternoon. This report's recommending the adoption for consultation of an addition to our rates remission and postponement policy of a postponement scheme directed at people affected by COVID-19. We're already offering ratepayers a deferral of the payment of the fourth quarter rates invoice until the 31st of August. This will allow those who are struggling financially the chance to manage the impact on their finances of alert level 3 and 4. But we recognise that many ratepayers may still be struggling as we enter into the new rating year. So to support them, we propose to offer a rates postponement for the 2020-21 year with a further year to pay off the outstanding balance. So if they postpone their 2021 rates, they don't have to pay them all on the 1st of July 2021. The draft policy you've got, we'd like to make a minor amendment to that after this meeting, just to ensure that those ratepayers who do ask to postpone their 2021 rates can carry over any fourth quarter deferral they haven't paid. We're proposing that the scheme will be available to all local ratepayers, except government entities and utilities. So government entities can rely on support from the Crown, and while we expect utilities will be affected by the economic impact, we think they'll still have strong cash flows and should be able to manage their rates. We're targeting properties owned before the 26th of March, and that ensures that we're only helping those affected by COVID-19 and not those who have taken risks after its impact was apparent. We're capping it at $20,000 per property to manage the uptake risk on the council's cash flows. Now, we do recognise that large businesses will be affected, but we want the support to focus on small and medium businesses and residential ratepayers. A 20k cap does still allow large businesses to postpone their first 20,000, and it would only be a small proportion of properties that wouldn't be eligible for the full support. We think our uptake will be up to 85 million, which the council can manage within its financial forecasts. The scheme provides for the council to recover its interest and admin cost. Unlike our current residential scheme, we won't have a minimum equity level, as 1 year's rates is only a small part of the value of a property. We are facing uncertain times, and it's not clear how long the economy will take to recover. While we expect most ratepayers to stabilise their financial position within a year, some may still need assistance. So the proposed scheme has provision for you to decide to extend it for a further year, and we'll report to you on that early next year. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So what I'll ask is if councillors can run through their comments and questions combined, and I'll just do that in alphabetical order. Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Andrew, what would be, for an average household ratepayer, what would be the interest and administration costs on a year's postponement?
The council's current, I think our average cost of funds across our portfolio is about 4%. Marginal is about 1.5%. The administration costs, we haven't established exactly what they would be yet. We have identified in the paper that we don't propose requiring people to have a statutory land charge, and that avoids $160 of cost. We'll be looking to administer this as cheaply as possible, and we'll take some time over the next couple of months before, 7 weeks before a decision's made to establish exactly where we should set that fee, which we'll do through the councillors. If we went with our average cost of borrowing for a year, for the average residential ratepayer, it might be around $50 for a year's rates.
Thank you. Eminently fair. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's just making sure that if we did charge an interest fee, then this could be seen as a loan. Have we made sure that it's not going to fall under any issues with the credit legislation? And then the other thing that stood out for me was that we're only really specifically focusing this on people with mortgages. But if you've lost your job, then you've lost your job. Whether you have a mortgage or you own the house and don't have a mortgage, you're still going to be financially stressed.
So the postponement of rates is specifically provided for in the Local Government Act, so it doesn't fall under the credit contracts arrangements, although with our current postponement scheme, we do ask people to think about getting some financial advice. As far as the focus on those with a mortgage, the reason we've suggested that is because those with a mortgage are likely to be far more financially stressed than those who own their property mortgage-free. So if you own a property mortgage-free, you won't have any rent payments to make, and you won't have to make mortgage repayments, which are about, on average, 10 times the amount that people pay in rates.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question is Councillor Casey. Are you there, Kathy? I'll come back to you if...
Andrew, my question's specifically about churches and religious organisations. Can you just say a few words about them? Are they treated as not-for-profit?
Churches and religious organisations are primarily non-rateable for nearly all of their activity based on the decisions that the councils made last year. If they did, however, have a business operation that was still being rated, then they would be able to apply under the scheme, under the business rules for the scheme, if their business was struggling financially.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Nothing from me, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Coombe.
No questions or comments from me, thank you, but happy to support.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Nothing for me. Very good package of help.
Councillor Dalton.
Nothing from me, I support.
Councillor Darby.
No, with support.
Councillor Filipaina.
Just one question, Your Worship. So the ability for those homeowners to not pay rates until their homes are sold, that's still an option, isn't it?
Yes, our existing policy would continue. That's for residential ratepayers who've lived in their house for 2 years. That will continue.
Okay, thank you. Happy to support.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
No, I support this. I just note with Andrew that, we are anticipating people will hopefully be back on their feet in a year, but I like the fact that there is provision for us to look beyond that, because I think what we are facing at the moment will be a bit harder and a bit sharper than just a year's recovery.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, thanks. Just delighted that we can support the people that really need it and the people that are really struggling out there. So happy to support.
Councillor Mulholland.
Great work, team. I think it's fabulous to support community. One question I've got, Your Worship, is do you believe that there is an absolute understanding on behalf of those who will apply once this is approved, exactly the implications? And I would like to know, people may see this and not understand the fees and associated charges and then struggle more. And so that's just a concern about how will people who take up this option, which is a fabulous option, and I totally agree with it. The other thing is just with regards to Councillor Bartley's questions too, I absolutely agree that for those that have purchased a home and may have lost their job, and we've just seen a round of losses of jobs through a number of companies, they may still be struggling. So I think we've got to be very open in the process and how we respond to community. So just that question first up about awareness of what people are agreeing to, that process, if I could have that clearly outlined, please. And if this is not the right forum, I'm happy to take it offline, but I do think we should understand that people have an opportunity.
Andrew?
So, our rates team will make sure that people understand any fees and charges that will be associated, or interest costs that will be associated with it. And as we develop that, we'll make sure that we're looking at getting it at the appropriate level in the context of what we're trying to do with this scheme. And make sure that anyone who's applying knows what the charges will be. They've got the teams well practiced at that through all the other contacts they have with ratepayers.
Thank you. Now I skipped over Councillor Hills. Councillor Hills.
Yes, no, this is good. I guess comment was just generally back to if we'd heard back from government about rates postponement, and just making sure that this is as easy as possible for people to sign up to, which I'm sure we'll be doing and working.
Sorry, that question was about rates postponement or rates rebate?
Sorry, rates rebate was the first bit, if we've heard back from government, and the second thing was just making sure that this process was as easy as possible, which I'm sure it will be.
The answer is we haven't heard back yet, and I'll just ask my office to put a reminder through to the Minister's office that we're awaiting a reply on that in the context of our budget provisions. Councillor Newman.
No questions, Your Worship. I'm very supportive of this.
Thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Obviously very happy to support. I think this is a key paper for us. I think we should be proud that we're putting pretty much what sort of a hole we've got, and this is really putting businesses and people first, in so much that we're doing everything that we can as a rating authority, for want of a better word, to support those who've been impacted by COVID-19. I'm very happy with the paper.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart. Sharon, are you with us on the line?
No, I just had to try and find the mouse.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm very supportive of this, and I'm really pleased that with the question that Tracy had, and I was going to touch on about the rates rebate, so that's good. We're going to find out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. IMSB Chair David Taipere.
No issues, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Very supportive.
Thank you. Councillor John Watson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question and comment. So I'm assuming any ratepayer who doesn't apply for this postponement, they will automatically then generate the 10% penalty charge as per normal?
Yes, if a ratepayer fails to pay their rates by the due date, they would incur the penalty, yes.
Okay, so a pragmatic question in terms of communication. We know that, for instance, the $640 rate rebate from the government doesn't have as big an uptake as it could. I guess the danger I'd see in these really stressed circumstances is that it all becomes a bit too much for people, and unless there's a very clear and repetitive communication that this facility is open, the last thing you'd want is people then falling into that 10% penalty regime, which is a bit like the old inland revenue where it accumulates and people get into a really dire position. So I'm assuming there's going to be a really clear and ongoing communication with ratepayers. I know this paper in points such as 16 talk about rates being only 5% of the income and minuscule in comparison to mortgages and all the rest of it. But in all honesty, I don't think that really takes account of how a lot of people pay their rates. That is, it's a big sum that comes along 4 times a year, and normal circumstances it's paid. But it's a last thing, it can be a last thing. So mortgage, food, and all these other things are going to go before it. So I think there could be a lot more people applying for this than conceivably we might anticipate, and that will be a reflection of what it's like out there. But really, I just want to really emphasise the need to make this very clear to people and to avoid people going into the 10% penalty regime, which then is the last thing that anyone wants.
Thanks, Andrew. In replying to that, can you maybe just walk us quickly through what the procedure would be before you apply the penalty, and how we're drawing attention to people about the availability of this facility and also of the government's rates rebate scheme?
So the message about communicating this as much as we can certainly be helped by the consultation and the publicity around that. That will draw attention to it, and our rates team will be looking to communicate this to all the ratepayers. They've got the opportunity of the rates invoices and other communications channels to make sure people are aware of it. The process, I'm afraid I'm not an expert on the application of rates penalties, so I can't answer that question directly. I'm not sure if any of my colleagues in that space are with us, but certainly our rates team does have a lot of contact with ratepayers to help them work through their issues. It's interesting to note that there are very, very few of those ratepayers who are on direct debit have had defaults. In the last 6 weeks, it's actually less than the same period last year. We're not expecting a huge uptake. Only 1% of residential ratepayers have taken up the fourth quarter deferral, which I hopefully is a good sign as to how many of them have been affected. But certainly we're looking to make sure in our communications this year that we get across the availability of the rates rebate and of the scheme, and ask people to get in touch with us if they're struggling.
So certainly, Mr. Mayor, I think obviously the rates notice itself, if there's some very prominent positioning there, that's obviously going out to everyone, and people will look at their rates, and that's a place to really make that clear to people, and then the advertising won't necessarily get picked up in the consultation. but will get picked up, you would think, when people look at their notices and whatever else we can do outside of that by way of publicity.
Yeah, I think it's really important that when we send the invoice out that people know what the options are available to them if they're under financial pressure. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Paul Young.
Oh, very happy to support. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Well, that almost makes the vote a foregone conclusion, so I'll put it on the voices, however. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no. I declare that carried, and I think we can say that's carried unanimously. Councillors, my intention to try to get through the next paper before lunch and then take a half-hour break for lunch before we proceed to the item, the emergency budget proposal under confidential. So with your agreement, we'll proceed in that way. If I can just double check on this public consultation approach, we've got Wendy Phillip, Tim Aiken, and Kenneth Alupatia on the line. Can you indicate who's on the line from this group, please?
Kenneth Alupatia here, yes. I'm here to talk to the paper. Thank you.
Okay, you're leading it, Kenneth?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Look, I'll move the paper, and I think it's a finance and performance paper. Normally, Desley Simpson, are you happy to second that?
I'm happy, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay. So, Kenneth, the floor's yours.
Thank you. So the recommendations are clear. We have taken you through at a previous workshop what our overall engagement approach is, but to draw your attention to probably 2 or 3 elements of your approach, of our approach. Firstly, have your say events. So the intention here, due to COVID-19 and the requirement for social distancing, is to, instead of face-to-face community, have your say events, conduct online webinars, and they will run during the consultation period, and the purpose being to provide information to the public about the consultation issues. They will involve obviously subject matter experts and elected members being present, and these are currently events that are being coordinated and scheduled to fit with council availability. Secondly, letter drops. So there was a query earlier around, well, can we do letter drops to all residents of Auckland? There's a table in the paper that talks about the pros and cons of option 1 and option 2. What we are recommending here is that we do not do letter drops because the communications campaign that Dan Lambert and the team have outlined and the communications channels that we're using to raise awareness is quite comprehensive. And from a feedback perspective, the proportion of feedback forms delivered to council as a result of mail drops is very low. Overall, 20% of all submissions are written, and of that, a very small proportion of that are a result of people sending them in from mail drops. In fact, 80% of all of our written submissions are from our community partners, who are very helpful in regards to reaching those demographic groups and communities that don't normally participate. And lastly, the other element I'll draw your attention to is the online survey that we're planning. So the online survey will allow us to ensure that we have evidence around public opinion in relation to the consultation topic issues that is statistically representative of the population of Auckland. And it will align with the demographics of the Auckland population. So we can ensure that within the people that participate or provide their views, it is a cross-section of Auckland that is robust. Without that, we risk just hearing from those who normally participate or a narrow cross-section of Aucklanders. Another thing to note is that it allows us to get reliability at both the regional and local board level. At a regional level, we expect a margin of error between 1% and 4%, and at a local board level between 8% and 10%. So that's allowing obviously yourselves to make decisions with confidence as to what the public opinion is. Happy to take questions if you have any. The last point I'll make is, in addition to the online webinars, because we can't have face-to-face Have Your Say events, we're providing the options for the public to phone call in and provide their feedback. We've set up a call centre or call hub that will allow the public or allow us to hear their views over the phone should they choose to use that medium, given we will not be holding Have Your Say events across the region face-to-face. Happy to take questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. We'll run through questions and comments as we did in the last paper, but I'll work in reverse order. But just before I start that, can you tell us a little bit more about how you feel that the webinars may work? Have we used webinars before in a consultation process? How effective, if we have, how effective were they? And can you give us an indication of the sort of participation that you want from your local board and from your ward councillor in those particular webinars?
Sure. So the webinars are something that we haven't tried here at Council. So this is an innovation that we're putting in place as a result of not being able to run the Have Your Say events. We do see that there are other councils around New Zealand, Wellington, for example, New Plymouth, who are employing these types of engagement platforms online to provide information to their constituents. So it's an approach that's been used elsewhere. We're looking at these sessions running for 1 to 1.5 hours each. At the moment, we are contemplating whether they will run by topic. There'll be sessions run by topic or by ward area as we work through those details. In terms of the role of elected members and subject matter experts, they are to provide information. There will be a set format that will be followed. Firstly, to set the scene and then to respond to questions that are asked by the public online. The public will be required to register online for those events, and that'll be the first opportunity for them to ask their questions so that we can front foot answers before the sessions run. And that will allow them to be, that will allow subject matter experts, council and staff to provide them with information that they can then fill out the online feedback form. So we'll be directing them to the online feedback form that's available at the Auckland Council website, rather than asking them to present their views at these sessions.
So will these sessions, Kenneth, be Skype sessions, or what?
Skype. So Skype, yeah. Having worked with our colleagues in ICT, Skype is the platform that they feel that is most likely to provide us with what we need in regards to them having done all the due diligence testing around it. The time to introduce other platforms, we're constrained by that to see what else is out there. So they're doing a lot of work to ensure that it's going to be a reliable and robust platform for us to use for our sessions.
Yeah, we're having a few problems with reliability of Skype in this session. Okay, let's run through questions and comments together, and we'll begin with Councillor Paul Young.
Yes, I have a quick question regarding the digital format and the digital survey. Digital format means some people either fill the form or download the document and print it out, fill the form, scan it, and save it, upload to and back to the consultation page. Looks like not really user-friendly. So do we consider have a digital survey in English version also for those translated consultation paper like Korean, Chinese, Tonga, Samoan, Maoris? And because my experience for last couple survey consultation in Howick Ward, particularly for the Flatbush Laser Center, the design consultation. Before the consultation, I asked the staff, they expect probably 200-300 phone feedback. And finally, that's more than thousands, so 3-4 times. Because at that time, I think we have a digital survey and also using like WeChat, the social media. So I just wondering whether this time we can also using the same digital survey, people can answer the write down their feedback straight away online or on their digital device, and what kind of cost will happen. And I know that time very short, and thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Kenneth?
Yes, so thank you for the question. So we definitely are looking at ways to ensure that we can be as inclusive as possible of those Auckland constituents that would prefer to respond in other languages. And there are a couple of things that I know that our corporate partner or Commonwealth Brunton will be doing to ensure that. This could involve, for example, calling back and going through, having an interpreter there to respond, but it could also involve providing them with survey content that is translated into other languages.
Yes, my question is for the survey, normally like we can reply on the website and then can submit straight away. But looks like the way we're not doing for this consultation, a part of the English on the website, but for using like WeChat other language, we need people need to download the document or fill the form and then scan and save it, which is the double up the people. And if we have very difficult, because I think the consultation, we try to more engage with the people and then have a better result and more people involvement. So I do want the staff can consideration. Thank you.
Paul, can I just clarify, you're talking about the independent quantitative survey when you talk about your digital survey?
I'm talking about this kind of consultation. Can we use it not just digital format? People can answer online straight away in different language as well.
Okay, Paul, you might just need to distinguish between what we're doing digitally and the independent quantitative survey, which generally we would give out to an agency, such as the ones that do the Commonwealth Brunton or whatever. What have you got in mind?
Okay, I can talk to suggest them later on.
I'm happy to talk to Councillor Young after the session.
Okay. But can I just ask, on the independent quantitative survey, you're talking about getting a group like Commonwealth Brunton to do that? That's the way we'd normally do that?
No.
No, sorry, I'm asking this question, Paul, to Kenneth, just on the quantitative survey.
Yes, that is correct. Commonwealth Brunton will be commissioned to conduct this independent survey on our behalf, with the University of Auckland there to peer review the process to ensure we can absolutely rely on the results at the end.
And you're talking about a couple of thousand people?
We're talking about a sample size of 4,000.
4,000, that's even better.
Yes, because we realise that we need to have some level of confidence of the results at the local board level as well, so that the results can be used to analyse whether there are differences between the regional view on the issues and at a local board level as well.
And if I can ask you, Kenneth, just to get in touch offline with Councillor Young about the way that some of the other work can be done, so we're totally inclusive of different communities and languages. Councillor John Watson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Pretty challenging times for you, Kenneth, with this, and good to see the commitment to genuine and high quality engagement that's stated at the outset there. I just wanted to pick up on the independent quantitative survey that has been mentioned, and it's going out to 4,000 people, which is a good survey sample. At the very end there, Kenneth, it mentions that this particular survey, which is is a very important one, is less than 50% of the cost of the LTP survey done in 2018. So what does that put the all-up cost for this particular survey at then?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. So if I could start by saying that the cost for this survey at most will be 110,000. The reason for the difference between the cost this time as opposed to the 2000 LTP survey is essentially because the phone interviews, they were not online. And the rationale for them being phone interviews, which costs a lot more to deliver in regards to fieldwork, is because the census data at the time said that landline penetration in Auckland at the time of the survey was to use an approach that used mostly landline. This time around, we have the 2018 census data available. It's telling something different. In Commonwealth Brunswick recommend, as a result of the significant growth in internet penetration in 2018, we can now shift to a methodology that uses more online survey with a small proportion of interviews being done using phone, because there are parts of Auckland, obviously, where internet penetration is still a challenge. And as a result of that, or as a consequence of that, we are now seeing cost for this survey being around 110,000 as opposed to the 250,000, which was for the RTP survey in 2018.
Thanks, John. You happy with that answer? Do you want to follow up?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, yes, follow up. Just in terms of that internet penetration, is there any research that gives any potential disadvantage of, I just think particularly of people that don't have access to to the internet? Is that factored in some way?
Thank you for the question. Yes, it is, and that's why we're not doing a survey methodology that involves all of online. A small proportion of the interviews will still be conducted by phone to ensure that we can have people who can participate using their medium as opposed to just relying on online. And that allows us to provide a more robust overall approach, but also deliver more value in terms of cost.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker. I'll come back to Wayne. Chair David Type.
Can you hear me okay?
Okay, we'll come back to you right now. Can hear you now. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so don't have any particular issue with what we're suggesting in terms of more digital and webinar communication. I guess what associates with that in terms of what we're communicating, in terms of what we're going out with, is the opportunity to make that more digitally friendly. So, for example, if we had some form of video that was communicating our situation, going through a number of points, explaining it, that would make it much, much easier for people to understand the situation and the differences between where we are now compared to where we would normally be. And that would then interact with, I would suggest, more informed digital feedback and better feedback in general. So I just make that suggestion, and also the suggestion that we provide good graphical information, good graphical financial information about our situation so that people understand the impact of the revenue loss that we've experienced, where that revenue loss has occurred, and what the impact of that is across the organisation.
Kenneth, is that possible if you're doing a quantitative survey like that?
So, Mayor Goff, I think the Dan Lambert will be the best person to talk to around what information we're providing, how we're raising awareness in regards to the consultation process. But I understand that the communications campaign is quite comprehensive, so we'll be looking to cover these kinds of issues.
Thank you. Chair David Typery.
Oh, kia ora, Your Worship, I could hardly hear you.
Sorry. Yep.
I'm pretty happy with everything there. I would sort of note that it's been a 10% response from Māori residents, up from 4% last time, so that's good. Also, there were a couple of matters around the Māori outcomes budget and the proposal for the Manaaki Fund. I think when the 17 June meeting with Mana Whenua is held, I think that those two matters will be quite important for Mana Whenua to be hearing about. So any presentations that are prepared for that meeting, I think should be including information around those two matters. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Councillor Sharon Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Could we just make sure that we get some samples sent to some of the retirement villages? Because I know in the past, quite often when I've spoken to people at retirement villages, they haven't really had anybody come out to see them, or forms, or can we just make sure that there's a good sample across the region? Thank you.
Kenneth, any comment
Absolutely.
on that, please?
We can definitely follow that up.
Thank you. Councillor Desley-Simpson.
Well, I just want to start by a short comment. Kenneth, well done. They say needs must, and of course we have an issue where we cannot consult in the inverted commas traditional way that we have because of COVID-19. So I think you've done a very good job of coming up with a solution. Look, we're having this meeting by Skype, aren't we? Having a solution where the digital medium gets a real good go. So congratulations on that. I looked at the letter drop, but I think the cost was prohibitive. What was the cost of putting everything into every household? Did you have an actual figure around that?
I think the estimated figure was around 650,000.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that whilst that conceptually was a good idea, the sort of cost outweighed the advantage. Look, I just want to go back to Paul Young's comment, and I think he made a good one. And look, I'm interested in the other councillors' comments on the issue of cultural engagement via languages other than English, and the way that's handled digitally. I think that's a really good point to bring up. And I don't know whether we have the resources in-house to receive information back, potentially where English isn't a second language, and translate it back. But I just think that's worth pursuing. If we're really going to look at ethnic communities, that may be a really good way of, he was sort of talking about WeChat and stuff. If you can take Facebook or as a social media platform and take that feedback as being valid, I just wonder how we do that. It's certainly worth pursuing from my perspective. But look, congratulations, thank you, and I'm very happy to support this way. We will engage. Thank you.
Thanks, Kenneth. And just to reiterate the point that Councillor Simpson's made and I made, if you can get back to Councillor Young so that we do ensure that no section of the community isn't aware of their ability to participate in this process because of language barriers. I think that's critically important. Councillor Greg Sayers.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'll just look as a segue in from your comment there. I would encourage Councillor Young to continue his conversations with Kenneth and the other officers, because I think what he's saying is that there are other digital platforms that we could utilise that are intuitive these days to many people, and we haven't accessed those yet, as well as being in other languages. So, look, first of all, I'm really going to enjoy seeing how the results of using these new mediums. Kenneth, well done. I think it's opportunity there for us to learn. So I'm going to fully endorse the recommendation, Mr. Mayor. My question is just one around the phone option where people can call in and register their feedback over the phone. Does that also, during that conversation, can people, do they have to just answer the questions, or can they also ask questions and get feedback? Will those type of people with the right advice be available over the telephone to answer those type of questions, or is it just a matter of giving their feedback as per normal submission forms without the opportunity to ask questions? Could I just get some information on that, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Sayers. So the phone call conversations with the public in regards to them providing feedback will obviously primarily focus on eliciting their feedback on the consultation topics. However, if the public do ask other questions or want to talk about other things relating to council, we obviously will then commit to ensuring that appropriate departments get that information and respond quickly. We do realise that then we may be challenged in terms of questions being asked during a phone conversation that we won't be able to answer. So we'll be ensuring or seeing that we can get subject matter experts with us, or making commitments that we will get back to them as soon as we can. So within a 48-hour period, just to make sure that we close the loop where those questions have been asked by the public.
Oh, great answer. Thank you very much.
just a clarification, Kenneth, are the phone calls with people who are actually there, or are they robocall type conversations?
Sorry, Mayor Goff, I'm not sure what we mean by robocall conversation.
Where you've got a robotic voice that's asking the questions and recording the answers. Or
hello, this is Auckland Council.
Our team will be there. So we've actually recruited people from within the organisation to actually man the phones over the consultation period, and they've all been trained to ensure that they can do it appropriately, and they'll be there for sets, I think 3 shifts a day over the consultation period, just to be there to take those calls or recall back people based on appointment that they make with us.
Okay, yeah, better to have a real person than a robot, I say. Councillor Daniel Newman.
No questions from you. Could get a whole lot of good telephone canvassing done, but no, look, I'm very happy with this.
Great, thank you. Councillor Tracy Mulholland.
Thank you, Worship. Kenneth and team that have worked on this fabulous work. I'm particularly interested in this type of work as well, so I want to congratulate you. I have thoroughly gone through the report. One of the questions I do have, because I am a supporter of sending a personalised letter, but of course the budget is prohibitive, and I wonder whether councillors might like to each contribute some funds to going to their own communities with a letter. So that's one question and an option. And I'm a great supporter too of making sure that we share with our diverse community. I want to support the platform, the webinar. I think that's a great approach. Let's see how people go with it. Maybe they will be over it by the time we go into this, but also supporting WeChat and those platforms. They are extremely popular and it helps people to understand, but yep, supportive, and yeah, maybe councillors might like to consider buying in on the letter drop themselves personally. It's in question whether councillors would or would not. I don't know.
I think that'll be an option for anyone that might want to do that within their own ward. Thank you very much. Councillor Richard Hills.
Yeah, thank you. This is very comprehensive. Thanks. It's great to hear the staff are jumping on board from within the organisation instead of contracting too much of it out. Agree on the mail out. That's why I think I asked during the workshop on it, and hearing that our figures, even when we do mail outs or our Auckland and every letterbox, the response is tiny compared to what we get in every other channel. So, and I know that sending a single letter out, the postage alone to 570,000 households and delivery costs, I think we just wouldn't be able to afford it right now, or get the information back within the time frame. So yeah, this is very thorough, and hopefully we get a lot of feedback. I just hope we're able to target some of those harder to reach communities in that time, and I'm sure that all of us will try as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Sorry, your mic must have gone dead on me because I didn't mean to talk over you. Councillor Shane Henderson.
I just wanted to congratulate staff for all the hard work, as always. We're in really weird times, and we've all noticed how hard you're working with short timeframes to get this all done. So thank you, and thanks to my colleagues as well. Good job, everyone.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Fletcher.
Nothing, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Al Filipaina.
Sorry, Your Worship, no, nothing here. I was just watching.
Thank you. Yep, no problem. Councillor Chris Darby.
All good, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Linda Cooper.
No, I'm comfortable with everything, thank you.
And I just jumped Councillor Angela Dalton. Angela?
Thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
No, that's fine. It's really great, Ken. Thank you. We are in good hands. I just didn't see, it might have been in there, just something that's going through neighbourly, because I have it on good advice from my older neighbour up the back. That's the go-to for some of the older residents. Other than that, thank you.
Kenneth, any comment on neighbourly?
We'll follow up on neighbourly to ensure we do something there as well.
Thank you. Councillor Pippa Coombe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Kenneth, for the work in bringing this to us. Appreciate it's a big ask to kick into another consultation round, particularly these times. But it's very supportive of what's proposed. I guess the big concern I have is in regards to the webinars, and my heart sank when you said it was going to be via Skype, not just because of the awful technology problems we've had today, but also because it's just not a platform that is a social media platform in terms of interaction and how it attracts people to it. Like, that just seems like a very rigid approach of doing something quite different. And having done tried out a Facebook Live as part of a local board consultation, which it was done in a very amateur way, but that attracted hundreds more people than would have ever come to a consultation meeting. And just seeing how during the lockdown there's been lots of creative ways that councils have engaged, and particularly, and this was an independent response, but 2 councillors in Wellington who've put together the Aotea Town Hall Facebook Live presentations, and they've just had a tremendous response. So it's a query and a concern, I guess, a question in terms of what is the thinking that we don't want these webinars to be far more attractive to those who want to be interacting with council via social media?
Thank you for the query, Councillor Coombs. So the decision to go with Skype was one that we worked with ICT around, looking to see within the timeframes what level of due diligence we could carry out to ensure we had something that would be usable at this time. That's not to say that we aren't also considering other platforms that I'm sure you're aware of outside of this consultation process that we could use for other future consultations. So yes, we do aware that there are I'm aware that there are some limitations to the Skype platform, but I think given the purpose and our intention here, will provide sufficient or adequate engagement as a tool. In terms of Facebook Live and other platforms, yes, they're exciting platforms, and that's something we can have a conversation offline around to see what we can do for those councillors who might be interested in looking at using those tools. But for the purposes of the set number of webinars that we're going to carry out, we have committed to using Skype for the purposes of this consultation process. I hope that answers that.
Yeah, fair enough. And I guess just to throw in there that if it is going to be via Skype in a very formal way and not really an interactive way, that they are done so that they can be a resource that people who like to watch something and absorb information visually that they can go back to and refer to. So I would very much like to see them done based on topics.
Yes.
I think that's where they would add more value. But just throw that in there.
Yeah, I agree. But we'll come back to you once we've firmed up the format and whether it's going to be by topic or by theme. But yeah, Eddie Toiavi is helping us lead the charge there, so he's looking to be someone that will be helping to facilitate those sessions, those webinar sessions.
Who's that? Sorry.
Eddie Toiavi.
Oh, great.
And he's got some, if you know Eddie the way that I do, he's got some exciting, innovative plans or creative plans that he'd like to inject into the session so that not so structured or, did I use the word boring?
Okay, my heart is just lifted hearing about Eddie's involvement. Thank you.
Eddie will add some zest to it, undoubtedly. Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of comments and then a question to you, Kenneth. I just wanted to agree with where the commentary was leading from Councillors Young, Simpson and Mayor Goff, just in relation to how we connect with diverse communities. I was interested because when Councillor Coombe raised the idea of Skype, and I'm really Skype has lost my confidence. I'm sorry, Mr. or Mrs. Skype, but you've really lost my confidence. And and then when you talked about Facebook Live, you said the word you used to describe Facebook Live was exciting platforms, and then when we were talking about Skype, you were talking about an adequate platform. And I guess that's part of my concern, is that, you know, this is post-COVID, this is an emergency budget, but we don't want to go with what's adequate. And I understand that there's time constraints, and I welcome the idea that you've said that we might be looking more at exciting platforms at future engagement. But I just think it was an interesting take on the words and the descriptors that were used in relation to how we get information back. Just like Councillor Coombe, I'm excited that Eri Tuiavi'i is has been drafted into your team so that he can assist. My one question, though, was in relation to point 14. The wording and format of the feedback questions contained in the document has been reviewed by experts at the University of Auckland. I don't want to bring into question any of their experts or what linguistic department it comes from, but I'm wondering if those experts have only looked at the questions that go out in English. And because it leads me to thinking, well, what's their use if we've just got them looking at English and perhaps making sure that the questions are framed legally in a legally safe way, so that when we offer our feedback, or when we get the Auditor General who all of this goes to, and we've got it all packaged, it looks right. But is the same group of experts looking at how those questions are going to be communicated in Korean?
I can honestly say at this point, no, they're not looking at it that way. So they're being commissioned or briefed to look at the technical structure of the question from a quantitative survey perspective, or but not from a language perspective, which is something that we will take on board going forward and see what we do about that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the experts are designed not to bias the questions, but they don't deal with the how that might be translated and whether something is lost in the translation. So that's a good point, Councillor Collins. Councillor Kathy Casey.
Thanks, Ken. I have a question. I haven't done a webinar before, but my read is this. Normally at Have Your Say events, the role of the ward councillor is to listen. That's what we do. We go there to hear people talk about our emergency budget. And what I don't understand is what you do when you get what will effectively be 10 politicians on screen, 2 councillors and, say, 8 board members from one of the boards. My experience has always been that it's staff subject matter experts who answer the questions. The rest of the time, we just listen. How is that going to work? How's it going to work, Ken?
Well, that's a very good question.
How do you see it? What is in your mind's eye? Because in my mind's eye, I can't see it working. I don't know how it works. What I mean is, you won't have 10 silent politicians. That's unheard of.
Okay. No, I agree. I agree, and that's why the sessions will be very well moderated. But I see there'll be a setting, perhaps first part of the session, which will talk to the context of the consultation. Then there'll be time to respond to the questions. And the plan, I think, at this point is that when people register for the event, they can ask their questions, and we'll be able to see there what kinds of questions they've asked and whether they would be more appropriately answered by a subject matter expert or by a politician, or both. But you're right, we are venturing into the unknown a bit here, given that we're trying this for the first time. We will learn a lot, obviously, from the experience, and hopefully after the first session, we'll be able to come back and see how we might revise the subsequent sessions after that.
It may well be, yeah, it may well be, Kathy, that we get a lot more participation through doing it online than we do getting people out to a church hall. So that I think we'll all be watching that with great interest.
Indeed.
Councillor Josephine Bartley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say awesome work, Ken and Dan and your team. I really appreciate how you've incorporated councillors in this approach. And yeah, I do want to put in a plug for Facebook Live though, following on from Councillor Coombe, because I think, oh man, how are our Pasifika families, all the different generations, gonna get involved in the annual plan kind of consultation, but then emergency budget consultation. But then I've seen on Facebook how there's families sitting together just on Facebook Live for church services and things like that, connecting with other families. So I think it's going to be really exciting. And I mean, if I can blow my own horn, my little cooking show is quite popular when I did do my Facebook Lives. It's like Councillor Mulholland's post as well. So yeah, I think I do put in a plug for Facebook Live. But anyway, thank you for your work. I think it's going to be really good.
Thank you. And we'll try and make our consultation as interesting as Josephine's cooking lessons. Bill Cashmore, lastly.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Kenneth. I'm glad to hear about Eddie. That gives me hope. But I'm concerned, no matter how good Eddie is, if the strike crashes or is intermittent or breaks up, then it carries with it a huge reputational risk for us. It'd be great for these webinars to succeed because it is the new way of communication. But we've got to get it right. And I'm not an expert in this stuff. I'll trust the team to do it and get it right. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. And that brings us to the conclusion of comments and questions. So, Kenneth, quite a lot of support for your approach there, but with a little bit of concern about some of the technological holes that they can fall down, which we've experienced today. So the recommendations have been moved and seconded. I'll put them on the voices. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
To the contrary, no. I declare that carried. Just before we break for lunch, I'll move the recommendation that, I've got a consideration of extraordinary business, and there is none. So that brings us to the procedural motion to exclude the public, and that's on the basis of the confidentiality of the financial information at this stage, but noting that that information will be with the public presumably after our meeting next week. So I'll move the motion to exclude the public. Do I have a seconder, please?
Councillor Mulholland.
Councillor Mulholland. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no. Carried. And can I suggest, councillors, that we take a break for lunch now and that we resume at 1:35. Okay. And we'll come back, of course, on the confidentiality.